What epic fails have you seen from people starting their own business? At a place I used to work, we supplied printing companies with their ink. Being that digital printing is well and truly established at this point, there wasn't a whole lot of business for this kind of ink anymore, so there was a lot of competition between suppliers. One of the technicians somehow weaseled his way to the top despite having no business experience. When he was told very simply just to make more money rather than go out and find new customers, his bright idea was to make our company's ink weaker with the intention that our customers would just have to buy more product to complete their jobs. Surprise! The customers didn't like that and went to the competitors. Business was closed within a year. The CEOs of the parent company in Japan weren't fully aware of everything this guy was doing to run the business into the ground. There was a lot more stupid crap he'd pull. I could probably fill a book with stories from that place. It was not a sound business plan that you could compare to other products and companies, because we were already getting some complaints that some of our colors were weak. This is what gave the guy the idea to make them weaker. He was told by several people it was a stupid idea and that it wouldn't have the desired effect, and that it would just drive our clients away. He was certain, though, that they'd all just accept the crappier product and pay more for it. The Banana Pudding Store. One day, my ex-boyfriend and I were taking a stroll downtown in the city that we were living in at the time. We passed a store that was called the Banana Pudding Store, or some such, I don't really remember exactly. Well, I say, let's go in. I'm sure that they sell more than just banana pudding. You know, like how Home Depot sells more than just hardware. Those guys sell Gatorade and candy bars. We went in and there were vats of banana pudding in the display cases, and I thought, well, surely they must sell other flavors. So I asked if I could have a chocolate pudding, and the guy politely informed me that they didn't have chocolate pudding. So I asked if maybe they had butterscotch or something else. No ma'am, just banana pudding here. I mean, it wasn't false advertising, but surely he couldn't be selling just one single flavor in that whole shop, could he? As expected, the next time we strolled down that street a month or two later, his store was shuttered. I feel bad for him. I'm sure that the guy made great banana pudding that all his friends and family would compliment him on and tell him that he should probably open a banana pudding shop because it was so good, right? But I don't think they literally meant that. Yeah, this sounds like an idea for a business you have when you're 12 and realize of your own accord that it might not be that great of an idea or just never get around to it. Why did nobody stop him? I kind of feel bad for the guy. Maybe try selling your niche product online first there, pal? Oh god, my friend that tried to grow green herb in the woods. It ended up working like a charm. He had so much green herb he could barely pick it all. Filled multiple garbage bags with it. Loaded the bags into his car. Then, well, he didn't research properly and just let it sit. He tried to smoke some of it after it got damp, but as you can guess, it just wasn't burning. A few days later, it was covered in hot mold, and the car smelled like a planet-sized skunk had exploded inside it. My schoolmate at high school wanted to be a club manager. He organized a concert where he invited a kind of famous foreign band to the local club. He paid so much money for them just to arrive and their expenses at the bar. In the end, about 20 people showed up, half of them were his friends. Fortunately, he had a rich dad, so his dad paid for that and life went on. The guy started selling art the next day. No need to say he failed miserably again. In about 2005, my friend's dad tried to start an arcade. In a small town, quite a long walk away from a school using beat-up second-hand machines. To get there from school, you'd have to walk by an established, larger arcade that also sold food. For some context, I live in Las Vegas. When I was in my 20s, I was hired by a man who wanted to build MySpace for exotic dancers. His goal was for the men on the site to pay him to follow their favorite exotic dancers and know what clubs they were dancing at and when. He shut the project down after months of paying me when he found out that no exotic dancers would sign up for it. One of the younger dudes in my karate class was going to start a handyman business. 24 hours, anything needing to be done, anywhere in our district. Sounds good. You gonna get a loan and buy a used truck and get some tools? And you never have talk time on your phone, so you'll get a landline? This is 2006, so that wasn't super outlandish. No, I'll go on my bicycle and I'll just use the tools they have, and they can email me when they need service. Right, because when I have water spraying out of my geyser through the ceiling at 3 a.m., I'm going to email a guy on a bicycle to come and fix it using all the tools and ladder that I don't own. There was a guy in my town that opened a new business that was the equivalent of a brick-and-mortar version of Craigslist or newspaper classified ads. It was a unit in a strip mall with bulletin boards. You paid to put an ad up, and other people came to look at the ads with a small picture. This was after Craigslist existed, by the way, not some pre-internet thing. There was no actual merchandise in the store, just crappy pictures of stuff with the contact info. It wasn't even a high-foot traffic location. You had to maneuver through a busy intersection, park, and go inside to look at a bulletin board. It went under, and he tried to blame the landlord because he couldn't get a sign permit for the end of the building, even though he had 2 other signs. When I was in high school, one of my friends wanted to start a little coffee/hot chocolate stand with a cuddle corner and free hugs for anyone who wants them. She offered jobs to our other friends. The idea was that this little business would be operated and staffed by high schoolers. She failed to see the issue with having 16-year-old girls required to give free hugs to customers or having to staff the cuddle corner. Ugh. Hey, you remember that guy who went on Shark Tank to pitch a Bluetooth earpiece that you got surgically implanted in your ear canal that you charged by sticking a needle in your ear while you slept? Brilliant! Somebody thought that it would be a good idea to open a dance club in my northern Canadian city with a dress code. 90% of the population were tradespeople and miners who only own Carhartts and high-vis. Needless to say, it shut down within 6 months. I used to work with small startup businesses, not fancy tech startups. Lots of construction and restaurants. My favorite 2 are the following. The first one was a restaurant/hair salon/childcare center, but non-profit. And there were a lot of people who wanted to do non-profit. It was mostly very community-driven, wanting to give back and help employ people. She had a place picked out and was about to rent and had come to us to ask for money. She named the building, which was tiny and with no kitchen. She was lovely and we encouraged her to open the salon, but maybe without the salon workers cooking for folks in between clients, and without clients caring for kids. Then there was the escort bus. An older gentleman who was certain that this was a good idea. He wanted money to buy a bus, and then he was going to drive it around to find women who wanted to hang out with CEOs and executives. Then during the lunch hour, he was very insistent about the lunch hour part. He'd take it to the downtown business core and park it in front of the large business HQs, and the gentleman who worked there would pay to come party on the bus. But you see, they'd just be paying a fee to hang out on the bus, so it's not like the girls were being paid for doing the deed, so it's totally legal, right? He'd already bought the bus, and it was an old school bus. We didn't fund his endeavor. I'm trying to picture the guy who had this business idea, and all I'm seeing is Danny DeVito's character from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. This is a grade A Frank Reynolds idea, right down to the likely broken down and unsanitary school bus. I love it. An old local pub legend, friend of mine, won $400K in British pounds, which is about $500,000 on the lottery. So he decided to buy 2 tanning salons opposite each other, thinking he had an instant monopoly. But the problem came when he started getting them to compete with one another. The managers at each salon began a pricing war, and he was broke in 6 months. The top for me has got to be a client of a design firm that I used to work at. He was a trucker, his wife was a trucker, he wanted to make a sanitary pad that wouldn't need to be changed. Imagine a pad with a little line running down to a micro vacuum strapped to your leg, exhausting into another leg bag. Basically, a pad that sucks the juices into a bag you can chuck in the trash later. Now, I know this sounds a bit like the Pure Wick, but the challenge this one would have to solve was passing chunky menstrual blood. Ladies, you know what's up, through a tiny tube. If you're wondering how they solved it, they didn't. Also, here's another good one. One client wanted a vape that just blew green herb smoke into the air for the purpose of hotboxing his car. He had money, so hey. One of the engineers designed a little turbine, like a small turbocharger the size of a cherry. Damn if it didn't work way too well. But the high-pitched, screeching noise that turbine made, sheesh. A lady opened a southern soul food buffet in my city. It was incredible. Amazing food. On some days. It was a buffet with a rotating menu depending on the day of the week, and those days were not equal to each other. So what happened was people would go on an off day, be unimpressed, not come back, or come on one of the better days, love it, and come back on an off day, then never come back. I was so disappointed. I'd donate towards reopening that restaurant, but with only the optimal menu every day. That woman has serious culinary talent. We have a small-time theme park in my state called Evermore, and they thought it would be a good idea to try and sue Taylor Swift over her album of the same name. They probably thought it would be a great publicity stunt where they'd get into national papers, and Swift would just give them a couple of grand to go away. In my college town, there was a cereal restaurant. Why make a bowl of cereal at home when you can pay $5 for someone else to do it? Not surprisingly, it closed down soon after opening. There was a bar that opened in my city, and their entrance was hidden. They did a news story, and they refused to tell the paper where it was actually located. To everyone's complete surprise, they only stayed open for a couple of weeks. The last hidden bar I went to had someone standing outside in the hidden entrance, and if you looked confused enough, they'd walk up to you and go, "You looking for the hidden bar?" and open the door for you. The venue at least had signs, and they're listed on the webpage. In my country, there was a guy who used to sell wood. Get your minds out of the gutters. The problem is, he didn't have any of it. Get your minds out. So he'd ask for payment and then not give the product afterwards, hoping that procrastination and time would make the problem go away. He did 4 years in jail. I mean, wood jokes aside, that's just stealing. Yeah, well, he thought he was very smart. In addition, he'd make web lectures on marketing and how to be a successful businessman. He soon became a meme in the whole country. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My father-in-law drove 18 hours down to Florida to catch shrimp, filled his tiny car with tons of the shrimp, and drove back. It took days to seal the shrimp that hadn't gone bad, only to sell a few bags to some friends. The car smelled like seafood for years. In 2011, we had the Norwegian butter crisis in Norway. The shortage caused soaring prices, and stores' stocks of butter ran out within minutes of delivery. A pack of butter would sell for between $40 to $200 on the black market. A friend of mine got the idea to drive over to the neighboring country, Sweden, to buy butter and sell it here in Norway. The problem was that you could only carry 100 packets of butter across the Norwegian border. So he made a deal with our local nursing home. He rented a bus and took 20 elderly people on a road trip to Sweden in exchange for receiving the butter quota. The next day, the butter crisis suddenly resolved, and he was left with 2,000 packets of butter he couldn't sell. He still got his basement full of butter. I swear to God, half of these just sound like Always Sunny plots. I really just thought that show was about hilarious East Coast white trash that couldn't survive in real life. Turns out it's a goddamn documentary about self-starters the world over. Thanks for submitting your story on It's Always Sunny in the Nordic countries. A small family bar and restaurant that I worked for back in high school, which was bought by a local couple. He was a retired insurance company exec of some kind that played golf all day, and she was a stuck-up witch of a woman that had never worked a day in her life and who looked down on all of the restaurant's employees as some kind of uneducated lower life form. The place was located in a small town, and the clientele were mostly local farmers taking their families out in the evenings, factory workers at lunchtime, and on Sunday mornings retired elderly people on fixed incomes who would mob the place after church. The restaurant up to that point was profitable. I'm sure they liked the financials they saw on paper, or they wouldn't have invested in it. However, once they took over, they decided to, quote, improve it. There was one elderly couple in their 90s who'd been coming in every Sunday morning for years who had no teeth. They always ordered the same thing: 2 hot roast beef sandwiches with mashed potatoes and extra gravy, run through a blender, served in a bowl so they could eat it with a spoon. We were now forbidden to do that since the new owner thought it looked gross and didn't fit the image of their fine dining establishment, so the couple stopped coming in as they couldn't eat roast beef any other way. Beer was no longer served in bottles at the tables. If you wanted beer in the bottle, you had to go sit at the bar. At the table, it was poured into a glass before being served. Some people really didn't like that new rule and stopped coming in. There were plenty of other bars in the area to grab a burger at. The first thing the owners did was put an end to overtime pay. The staff consisted of about a dozen older, long-term employees that mostly lived nearby and walked to work because they couldn't afford cars. These people worked their tails off, some of them 7 days a week. for about minimum wage just to be able to afford their rent and groceries. Once they were told that they could no longer work 50 or 60 hours a week to make the maybe $25 a week in overtime, most of them had no choice but to quit and go find some place where they could make enough to survive. Pay them a little more? Heavens no, these are unskilled positions. The new owners found that when they advertised for new employees to fill the vacancies, they didn't get the flood of applicants that they'd expected. Waitresses, for example, were paid $1.70 an hour at the time, and cooks made $4. This was in the 1980s, and the local sewing factories paid more than that to start. So they ended up hiring a bunch of their daughter's high school friends, most of whom were the cheerleader crowd that didn't want anything to do with getting dirty, like scrubbing the floors or restrooms, and none of who could ever work on nights when there was cheerleading practice or a football game or pretty much any Friday or Saturday at all. So the place was chronically short-staffed constantly, orders came out slowly, and the new owner just sat at the bar fuming instead of doing anything to help, occasionally coming back to scream at everyone to stop goofing off and speed things up. Then, when business started to drop off, they decided to remodel to attract new customers. They tore all of the carpeting out of the bar area and replaced it with this ugly yellow vinyl flooring so the working man can come in and feel at home. Like regular people never had carpet in their houses. They added a char-broiler to the kitchen and decided they wanted to add char-broiled haddock to the menu. Have you ever tried to grill haddock? It falls apart in little pieces and looks awful. They decided this was obviously the fault of the 16-year-old kids they hired to make the food. At the same time, they remodeled the bar to make it look homey to the lower classes of people, and then they added expensive scotch and other high-end liquors to sell to the customers, most of whom were draft Budweiser and Miller drinkers. They also, as it turned out, rarely ordered quiche for lunch. The place lasted for about a year and then sat empty for about 10 years before someone new bought it, probably because they were trying to sell it for a huge profit after it was no longer an operating business. A guy I know got a small inheritance, enough for a deposit on a unit or a small house. Nope, seahorse farm. As it turns out, seahorses are very difficult to breed. Someone in Edmonton, Canada opened a dairy store, milk and cheese, and planted it across the street from a large grocery store. He hoped that shoppers would buy everything they needed at the grocery store except their milk and cheese, which the grocery store had an ample supply of, and make another trip to their store for milk and cheese. The place I'm talking about just supplied the same big dairy milk at the same prices and no fancy cheese. It was really only convenient when you only needed a carton of milk and didn't want to deal with a huge parking lot and the hassle of a massive store. So it didn't last. Monthly adult bedroom toy subscription. You'd get a different toy each month, which is an okay idea, I guess. There's one of those for everything nowadays. But the only problem this guy had is that he wanted the customers to eventually return the toy so he could pass it on to the next customer. He actually got into talks with an owner of a local toy shop to help him start, but the enthusiasm flattened out quite quickly. Maybe it's a sign that I should expand my friend network, but the narrator actually feels like he knows more than one person who had used this service. You'd hope that they'd go through a lot of sanitizer in that line of work, though. A loudmouth drunk, supposedly an ex-NFL player from way back, opened a fancy pizza place across the street from the small town's old favorite normal pizza place. It was a pretty obvious attempt to put the old place out of business and corner the lucrative small-town pizza market. The owner of the new place would get hammered and walk around to random tables to schmooze. He'd loudly hit on the ladies in front of their dates. It did have really good pizza, but it was horribly overpriced and the portions were tiny. It went out of business pretty quick. We had a woman in town who started this bookstore/candy store combo. It was just weird and I'm not sure what it was trying to be. It was a bunch of kids' books and then a whole bunch of handmade weird chocolates and not even stuff that would be appealing to kids. Stuff like green tea chocolate, chili pepper chocolate, super dark chocolate, among others. There were tables to eat the chocolates, but then you couldn't look at the books because your hands would be dirty. The whole thing was just bizarre. Strangely, it did stay open for a year, and in fairness, the lady who owned it truly was a sweetheart. People loved her. She was an older, super kind, super chatty lady. But the business was, well, not sustainable. A guy I know bought $150,000 in fidget spinners at the height of the craze. It took months to ship out from China, and by the time all of his crap had arrived, the mania had ended, and the retail price was already near his original wholesale price. The frickin' guy still has fidget spinners today. I guess he might eventually do okay on it, but my god. A digital camera that looks like a classic Japanese 35mm point-and-shoot. The memory card, which looks like a 35mm film roll and only has space for 36 images, has to be sent away like in the old days to get developed into prints that are mailed back a week later. This is currently on Kickstarter at time of writing. My dad has been in hundreds of pyramid schemes. When I was a kid, he'd always describe how the pyramid worked, and I'd help him with his meetings. It took me a long time to figure out his get-rich plans were really schemes. He still does them. He's never been rich off them, though. One was Excel, a super cancer-beating fruit juice. Then you give me $5,000, then you get 5 people to give you $5,000, then they get their own people to give $5,000. A specialty chocolate shop. It only sold the exact same standard candy bars as any supermarket, but with less range and at 4 times the price. I asked the manager if he had Lindt chocolate balls, an upmarket but well-known product, and he said, "What are those?" Also, there was a supermarket 2 doors down. Someone in my neighborhood opened an artisanal hot dog restaurant called Everyone's Frank about a decade ago. My dad and I went in once at about 6 p.m. on a Saturday. We were the only customers, so the owner, who was working the register, chatted us up. He talked about his plans to expand the business to about 15 locations, which was completely delusional. He also talked about how much he spent on the interior redesign, which was pointlessly fancy. The hot dogs cost $9 and tasted terrible. We never went back, and the place was bankrupt within 6 months. My dad always said they'd gone Frankrupt. I have a friend whose family has gotten involved in multiple pyramid schemes, and every single time they get into a new pyramid scheme, they claim it's not a pyramid scheme. No, you don't get it. I am the boss. Once I produce 5 clients for my mentor, then I get to keep all my new clients, and they have to get me 5 new clients each. It's people helping people. Have you ever witnessed a birth that was clearly a result of a cheating spouse? It wasn't at the birth, but I used to work for a urologist who did vasectomies. He did a vasectomy on a guy, then did the requisite 3-month and 6-month fertility follow-up test to make sure it worked. The 6-month test showed no sperm, so the guy was all set to not father children. Fast forward 2 years, and he calls my surgeon fuming, ranting and raving about how they messed up the vasectomy, and now his wife is pregnant. So Doc orders another fertility analysis. Of course, it comes back totally negative. A very awkward conversation ensued in the exam room that I'd have paid anything to eavesdrop on. The best part is, the couple left the office teed off, with the wife sticking to her story that she would never cheat on her husband, and the husband in complete denial that she'd ever lie about that. Last I heard, they were gearing up to sue or something, but I don't work there anymore, so I don't know what happened. Not 100% sure how those tests go, but I just laughed out loud at the thought of some dude angrily tugging away like, "Not my kid, I'll show you." These stories remind me of something I experienced firsthand the day after my son was born. Nurse: "So, your baby's blood type is A negative. Wife: "Like me." Nurse: "And daddy?" Me: No, I'm an A+. Nurse: "You must be mistaken, that combination isn't possible. I'll leave you guys to it." Me pulls out phone and frantically Googles baby blood type combinations. Disclosure, the nurse was wrong. "Props for checking first before attacking your wife." Yep, that's why he checked first, but if he attacked her straight away like some guys in these stories, they'd have one hell of a marriage to repair afterwards. A patient asked if both possible fathers could be in her C-section so that neither would miss the birth of his child. They'd figure out the details later. After a lot of careful consideration, because it did seem like a semi-reasonable plan, the answer was no, because it was too easy to imagine many scenarios in which a fight might break out in the OR and instruments go flying. Also, there's a pretty strict rule about only one person allowed with the patient in the OR. In the end, she brought her mum. You know what? Out of all the outcomes here, I think they definitely settled on the most sensible one. Possibly the only sensible decision leading up to that baby. Who knows? We don't know the full story. A friend of mine went through it. He went down a dark path of substances and we'd lost touch after a big fight about how he was messed up all the time and he was wasting his life. He contacted me out of the blue to say that I was right. He needed to step up and be responsible, and that he'd quit everything cold turkey because he was going to be a dad. Apparently, he was going to help his girl get sober and they were going to have this kid and get married. He really got his crap together over the course of the pregnancy. He was clean, got a job, and got a nice place to live. She was not so dedicated. She continued to use all kinds of substances throughout the pregnancy. She ended up going into labor early at 26 weeks. She gave birth to a premature, addicted baby boy. He went directly into the NICU. She stayed at the hospital and visited the NICU until she was released. She then disappeared. She never visited the baby, never called to check on it, didn't go home, just fell off the face of the planet. He, however, spent every spare second at the NICU with that baby. However, as the weeks passed, it became pretty obvious that the baby wasn't his, as skin tone evened out and hair came in. Chick was blonde with blue eyes. My friend is super pale blonde with blue eyes as well. The baby was clearly half Hispanic. He wanted to adopt the baby, but they wouldn't let him. The state took it and it went into foster care. It totally messed him up for a long time. He relapsed for a while and got into a bad car accident. He spent some time in the hospital and then got everything back together. He's married now to a really nice girl and rapidly had 4 kids that are his with another currently on the way. Isn't that just the worst thing? What was so different about him than any other potential adoptive parents? At least he'd been there the whole time. At least he cared. Did they really think putting the baby into a convoluted foster system was the best thing for him? Glad the dude's doing well though. Probably his history with addiction, which may have come with some legal troubles, which worsens the situation in the eyes of CPS. When I was born, my father was 100% certain that I was not his because his blood type and my mum's blood type couldn't have produced me. He punched a hole in the wall in the hospital and yelled at my mum refusing to sign the birth certificate because I have A positive blood. My mum has 0 negative and he was positive that he had AB negative because that's what his brand new dog tag said. He was in the army at the time. Turns out they'd misprinted his dog tags. All his old tags said A positive. In conclusion, a typo on my dad's army-issued dog tags almost caused my parents to divorce. To be fair, a misprint like that could kill him in other ways. But it's absolutely possible for an O negative and an AB negative parent to have an A negative baby. Like the only 2 blood types that couple could produce are A negative and B negative? Do you mean you've got an A positive blood type? I'm not a doctor, but when my godson was born, the nurse told us about this guy who had gotten 2 girls pregnant at the same time. They both wound up in the hospital just down the hall from each other, giving birth hours apart. What a lucky guy. When my mother was giving birth to my little sister, my paternal aunt was also giving birth to my cousin in the same hospital. My dad was back and forth between the 2 rooms often enough to get some looks from the hospital staff. Funny story that reminds me of this. My husband, then boyfriend, was in the process of getting divorced when I found out I was pregnant. His soon-to-be ex-wife found out a month later she was also pregnant from a guy she'd had a one-night stand with, not my husband. Prior to this, she was refusing to sign divorce papers because she hoped to reconcile even if he did have a pregnant girlfriend. Obviously, it wouldn't work out since she got knocked up by another guy, so she finally signed them. The similar part is that our due dates were 11 days apart. We had the same obstetrician and were set to deliver at the same hospital. My company switched insurances a week before I was due, and I got to pick a different hospital. Wouldn't you know it, we went into labor hours apart and delivered on the same day. Our obstetrician had to deliver my son first and then run across town to deliver her son. The OB did a double take when he saw my ex's family show up to visit her late after visiting us. They were the, "He may have divorced her, but we didn't" mind. His sister even stayed when she delivered to be her support buddy, even though she was officially with the one-night stand guy and his family was there. Our OB told us that may have been the most Jerry Springer thing she'd seen in a while. My friend was the delivery nurse for the hospital that all high-risk pregnancies go to. They're extremely busy and she's brought a lot of people into the world. She once delivered a baby in the parking lot by herself. This has come up on a weekly basis, but she shared the best story with us. A Caucasian couple come in and the mother is in labor. When the dude is filling out paperwork, the mother takes the doctor aside. She tells him there is a chance that the baby may be a different race than the father and to let her know as soon as the baby is born. The baby is born. The doctor turns to the mother and announces loudly, "Congratulations on your white baby boy." Well, this is fun. My wife's cousin, third, came out black. She's married to the pastiest Irish guy you can find. Their marriage didn't end, but this has created an interesting story. Grandma tells everyone that he is really just Native American. Her husband was half Native. He's now 15 and still no one in the family will admit that he's black. One of my colleagues in anesthesia once placed an epidural in a heavily tattooed lady. Apparently she had Steve's lunchbox tattooed above her hoo-ha. She gave birth. The OB-GYN turned to the father in the room and said, "Congratulations, Steve." The guy stated, "My name isn't Steve." No meltdowns or anything, just an awkward moment. That is brilliant. Also, what a tattoo to commit to. Clearly some misplaced faith in the longevity of a former partner's relationship. That'll be a painful one to remove. My mum is a labor and delivery nurse. One time she had a patient whose parents were present during her stay at the hospital. The staff there have a whiteboard with some general information about the patients like blood type, time spent in the wing, and like how far along. This information is nameless for IDOWorkHereLady reasons and instead has a patient's number. So this patient happened to be the only one in the wing at the time. Her father was walking back from the cafeteria at one point and noticed the board. He stopped one of the nurses and asked if the blood type for the patient on the board was correct. He knew his daughter was the only patient there. It was B positive. The nurse confirmed it was correct. Turns out he knew his and his wife's blood type. He was O positive and his wife was A negative. The combination will never yield a B-positive baby. He brings his wife out and just points to the board, and this look of shock washes over her. In conclusion, father of patient in labor finds out his wife cuckolded him 25 years later by knowing his blood type Punnett squares. Did he draw the squares in the whiteboard? I would have totally done that. Funny story, I ran a lab in college, and we were teaching the kids about blood types. Kid insists that his parents were a certain type of blood and that his square had to be wrong. Came to find out he was adopted and had just found out through basic bio. Poor kid. I'm white and my wife is black. I'm a frog belly fluorescent white, think ginger light. My wife is earthy brown. No one would ever describe her as light-skinned. We have a daughter. She had a difficult labor and our daughter was delivered via C-section. She did not really get to see our daughter immediately after delivery. Later in our room she was dozing and they brought our daughter in. My relatives and my wife's relatives all commented on how my daughter looked so much like me and was not even close to the pigmentation of my wife. So I carried my daughter over to my wife and gently woke her and showed her our daughter, and said, "I don't think she's yours." We all had a good laugh. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My friend told me this story of hers. Woman and her husband were having their first child and it was the friend's first ever delivery, OB-GYN. When she got the baby out, she looked at it, then looked at the parents and asked, "Okay, which of you has 6 fingers?" The mother broke down crying, yelling "I'm sorry" to the husband. Their neighbor apparently has 6 fingers. Did the father begin a lifelong quest to bring the 6-fingered man to justice? That is inconceivable. When my wife was born, she was very yellow and the nurse quietly asked her mum about the paternity when the dad was out of the room. She was just born with a bad case of jaundice and that nurse was an idiot. "My husband is half Mexican and I'm of Native American ancestry. We both look pretty white though. When our son was born, he had plenty of the blackest hair and looked very yellow. They kept saying he was jaundiced. He was in the NICU for other reasons, but the tests didn't show elevated bilirubin. We kept asking when he could leave the NICU room with us as his condition improved. But 2 of the nurses kept insisting that he was also jaundiced and that they'd need to clear that first as my milk came in or through supplementation, using it like a threat to get me to supplement. Finally, my husband said, "He's not jaundiced, he's Mexican, damn it," and left the room. It was first time I laughed out loud in 5 days. The nurse was so flustered. My best friend's stepbrother was that guy who found out he wasn't the father because the baby was black. I'll try to make it short. Dude had gone to rehab twice and was doing really well. He came back home for a weekend and screwed his ex-girlfriend. Left and went back to his home state to continue his newfound life. Got the call that she was pregnant and dropped everything to come back and be a father. We were really worried he would relapse, but he was great. So 9 months of preparation goes by, he was going to be an awesome dad. All worries about relapsing were gone and he seemed ready to become the best dad he could ever be. Baby comes out, everyone's happy. Nurse takes him aside and after a few minutes says, "I want to ask you something. You do know that's not your kid, right?" He says, "What do you mean?" "Well, that baby is at least half black, but the pigments are probably going to really darken." So he goes over to his ex-girlfriend and asks if there's any way what the nurse told him is true. She starts sobbing and breaks down completely. Admits that she screwed someone else right around the time he came back. So he says, "All right, I'm glad you and the baby are healthy. Have a nice life." Walks into the waiting room where all the grandparents are waiting. Cheers, celebration. Everything good? Yep. Healthy baby, healthy mom. I'm not the father. I'm out of here. And walked right out the freaking door. The girl's parents even wanted him to pay and support. He moved back to where he got his life back together and is doing incredibly well. But man, I wish he had all that time back. At least he only wasted 9 months. If she had banged a white guy, they might not have noticed for 18 years. This is clearly an incredibly complex and nuanced problem. She was single and clearly shouldn't be judged for behaving as such, but maybe be upfront about seeing other people around the same time? Or with hindsight being 20/20, use protection. This story sucks for everyone involved. This one's about my mum. She had my brother when she was only about 16 and had a very hard birth with him. Back in that time, the husband wasn't allowed in the labor room and my grandma was at work. When my brother was born, he got stuck, so they had to use forceps, and he was also jaundiced, so he looked like an Asian baby. My grandma turns up after work and is looking at all the babies in the room where they were kept and asks which one was her daughter's baby. The nurse points to my brother, and him, looking all Asian, my grandma storms up to my mum in the ward and said, "Which Asian guy did you sleep with?" Well, my mum thought she was joking, so she said, "I don't know, it was too dark to see." My grandma then proceeded to hit my mother until a nurse came in and explained. My brother is now 44 and as white can be. So I'm an NICU nurse that was floating to the nursery. A baby was born with a specific genetic abnormality, he had one missing limb, but was otherwise doing fine. The pediatrician was in the parents' room discussing with them the follow-up type stuff for the baby, appointments with a geneticist, an orthopedic surgeon, etc. At some point in the conversation, the mother asked what the baby's blood type was, to which the pediatrician responded with A positive. The father of the baby insisted that was impossible, as he and his wife, this was their third baby, were both O negative. The pediatrician got totally flustered and came back to the nursery to verify the lab's results. The baby really was A positive. We even went so far as to redraw the baby's blood and retest it. Nope, A positive. There is absolutely no chance that the baby belonged to that man. The husband left the hospital soon after and didn't show up again until it was time to pick up the mum and the baby to bring them home. The mum spent the rest of the hospital stay lying alone in the dark, mostly hiding under the covers. My aunt is white and so was her husband. He passed a while ago. When they finally had a kid, my cousin was black. The family decided to ignore it, my uncle included. This was 1989, and to gain my young teen cooperation, I got an early Christmas gift, a Sega Genesis. Love my cousin. Not me, but this was an odd one that I heard because I casually knew one of the parents. The father, to be exact. He came in freaking out because his wife had a kid. Well, he was white, she was white. The kid was born with a very dark skin tone. He instantly dumps her and starts filing for divorce. She has no idea what the heck happened. She forces a DNA test on him before she'll do anything. 3 months later, well, turned out it was his kid. Her parents, his parents, everyone, think he is a butthead. His mother apparently had a black grandmother. So the genes came through extra strong somehow in their kids so many generations down the line. Safe to say they're going through a heck of a lot of therapy. She never cheated on him and he never believed her despite all her serious protests. Been about a year now and it's better but still not perfect. This happened to my brother's friend. His mother didn't tell him his father was black, so he grew up believing he was white. He got his girlfriend pregnant and the baby came out looking more black than he did. He stormed out, broke up with her, and kicked her out. After that, he confided in his mother about the situation, and that's when she broke the news to him. He felt like a butt and a half. She took him back, but he had to work for it. She was, of course, hurt by his accusations. But as far as I know, they're still together. My dad was a doctor and he never told me about any meltdowns, but he told me they would deliver a lot of babies for unprepared parents. Teenagers, mums and dads with obvious substance or alcohol problems, legal problems, etc., generally not ready to raise a kid. For every one of those risky couples, it was usually teen parents who were 16 or 17, he would take a picture of the new mum and dad together holding the baby a couple of hours after the birth. Then a few weeks later, he would send the picture to them with a short note about how they'll make great parents and the baby is counting on them and just inspiring words in general. He has a whole photo album of the new mums and dads holding their baby in the delivery room when he was a doctor. And I have to say, it is some outstanding photography. Amazing stuff. And to tie these stories off with something a bit more heartwarming, let's have a nice long saga from small-town Illinois. I heard this from an old client who was an obstetrician. He was telling me stories about when he used to deliver babies at people's homes way back in the day. This was probably 15 years ago when he told me this story, and he was in his 80s. 83 if I recall correctly. Anyway, he was telling me about his son, and I asked if he delivered his own son. He said yes, and told me the most amazing, heartbreaking, and heartwarming story. In the late 1940s, the town ambulance/hearse/taxi pulls up at his little independent practice out in the boonies of Illinois. A volunteer firefighter comes in and says they have a lady in labor and they won't make it to the hospital, which is over an hour away. He tells them to bring her in. He delivers the baby and Mum passes out. They clean her up, they clean up the baby. All seems normal. The mum wakes up and the doctor comes in to give her the baby. She starts screaming, "Get it away from me!" He's all confused and can't figure out what's going on. She keeps flailing around and screaming that she doesn't want to look at it. The doc takes the baby out back and comes back. She's calmer but still looks frantic and terrified. He talks to her and she just stares at him like he's got 9 heads. He finally asks, "Well, what do you want me to do with your son?" The mum stays silent for a long time, and as he's getting up to leave, she quietly says, "Can you get rid of him?" The doc asks what she means. She says, "Just make him maybe go to sleep so he won't wake up." He said it took everything for him not to beat this woman to death right there and then. He went off on a tangent about how much he loved his work, working with all the new mothers in these little towns full of salt-of-the-earth people with great family values. On and on about how happy it made him bringing life into the world, and this woman wanted him to murder her baby. He asked why, and she ended up saying that her husband is in the military and it's not his baby. She couldn't let him find out. He kind of understood her rationale for not letting her husband know, but murder? So he suggested family, an orphanage, and other options back then, none of which seemed appealing in my mind. She said no to all of them because she couldn't risk this coming back to haunt me. He told her he'd see what he could do, and he let her rest. The next day he tried talking to her again, and she was just more adamant about making it sleep. She said she wanted to hold her baby. He refused since he thought she'd try to kill him herself. She went nuts. In the end, he sent her home and told her that he had given the baby to his brother, who was a pastor and was unable to have children. He promised he'd never tell anyone, even the kid, who she was. Then he said he taught her a lesson. If she ever found herself pregnant again, she would come to him whether it was her husband's or not. If he ever found out she went elsewhere, he'd tell everyone the story. He said he did this because he was afraid she'd get knocked up and kill the next one. And he knew he'd find out if she went elsewhere because he was the only baby doctor for 5 towns around and knew other doctors at the hospitals. Of course, she could have delivered at home on her own, now that I think about it. She never had any other kids as far as the doc knew. And he said he did check up on her once or twice with his colleagues. Supposedly she died from a substance overdose a few years later. The doctor and his wife raised that baby as their own son. His wife wasn't able to have kids. The pastor brother was just BS, and it was to make her think he'd already given the baby away. He eventually told his son a very watered-down version of the story when the kid was older. The kid ended up becoming a plastic surgeon and has like 9 kids of his own. He's doing very well, he's very happy, and he probably would have never had a shot had that small-town fireman tried to press on to the hospital and wound up delivering the kid in the middle of nowhere. He was convinced she would have delivered and then smothered the baby by the time they got to the hospital. In conclusion, lady gets pregnant by another man. Her husband has no idea because he's in the military. She ends up at a small-town doctor and wants the doc to kill the baby so her husband doesn't find out. Doc raises the baby with his barren wife, and the baby grows up to be a brilliant surgeon who gives the doc tons of grandkids and a huge family he never would have had otherwise. Was your hangout with a celebrity better or worse than expected? Absolute best experience of my life. I ended up running over Bruce Willis. If you ever get a Make-A-Wish, ask to meet Kevin Smith. I was a bald, chemo-y freaking mess. My dad contacted Make-A-Wish. They came out and asked me what I wanted. I said, him. And within a week, our tickets were bought for us and our trip was planned. Usually takes weeks or months for celebrities to get back to Make-A-Wish. Kevin had whisked us out to New York to meet him on the set of Cop Out, which was then called a different name. He met me with the biggest bear hug of my life, and he was the nicest, sweetest, most genuine celebrity I could ever imagine. I spent the entire day on set, met Tracy Morgan, Bruce Willis, manhandled all of the equipment they would let me touch, and in the middle of it all, Kevin says, "Hey, you want to be in the movie?" "Yeah, I want to be in the movie." "Okay, I'm going to have you run over Bruce Willis." "Thanks, Kevin Smith." So if you watch Cop Out, I'm the student driver that runs over Bruce under the L train. At the end of it all, he invited us back to his penthouse overlooking the Statue of Liberty and let us see the rough cut of Cop Out. I spent all day and night with him. My life has been miserable in comparison ever since. When I was about 12, my mum won backstage passes to Huey Lewis and the News. I met Huey Lewis and then we got to sit in the front seats. He routinely pointed and sang at us throughout the show. Unfortunately, this was 2004, so I was surrounded by middle-aged women screaming at him. He was a nice dude, even though my mum told him I sang one of his songs as a little kid and named a song that wasn't his, as we learned a couple of months ago. He just went along with it. My father-in-law got in an elevator at a convention. Huey Lewis was in it. My father-in-law says, "Oh wow, you're Huey Lewis." Huey Lewis responds, "Oh wow, you're Doug last name." Father-in-law is in shock and asks how he knows his name. Huey Lewis then points to the convention name tag my father-in-law is wearing. When I was like 4 or so, I won a contest to have lunch with Lou Ferrigno. This was in the late 70s or early 80s when the Incredible Hulk was running, and I was a huge fan, so I guess I was totally disappointed to find out that his skin wasn't really green. I also remember that we had funnel cake. Yum. About 5 years ago, I won a competition to spend the day with Hugh Jackman on the set of Baz Luhrmann's Australia. Was the nicest, most sincere guy. Never forgot my name and introduced me to everyone. Total legend. He's one of the few actors you could never convince me was a crappy person. I saw a video of him recognizing a reporter at an event as a student of his from when he used to be a teacher. He seemed so happy about it. Yep, Hugh Jackman seems like an absolute delight from what I've seen. It takes a guy with a good, humble sense of humor to engage in that kind of joke rivalry with Ryan Reynolds and look like that much of a jerk. Won a contest a couple of months ago to see a private Cage the Elephant show, and got to chat with them for a bit afterwards. Really cool, funny guys. Gave me a shout out later that night during their actual show. The private concert was pretty awkward though. In 2009, I entered a vitamin water contest to meet Adrian Peterson just for the heck of it. I ended up winning. I got to talk to him for a solid 2 hours, then watched a movie with him. I got to bring my dad with me, and we both had a fantastic time. He's my dad's favorite player, and he nearly broke both of our wrists with his handshake. I also got an autographed jersey that I got framed. He was extremely pleasant and seemed genuinely glad to be there. Oh, and I got a year's supply of vitamin water, which was pretty sweet. Ever since that experience, I've entered every contest I've come across. When I was 10, my dad took me to a Kiss concert. Poison opened up for them, and we got to go backstage. It was kind of cool seeing all these huge guys with long hair that I had no clue who they were. Gene picked me up and called me handsome. That's all I really remember about it, though. I met Richard Simmons at Walgreens. It went exactly as you'd imagine meeting Richard Simmons at Walgreens would go. I met Richard Simmons at the Gap in Santa Monica. I was buying a gray shirt and he comes up to me and starts going on and on about how gray is a bad color on me and I must wear purple. The color of royalty and passion. He was outrageous and exactly like he is on TV. He then walked around and picked out some purple shirts, went up to the counter, and had some woman, his assistant I assume, buy them for me. He kept asking me if I was single or in love. I'm a dude with a girlfriend. In conclusion, Richard Simmons bought me some purple t-shirts from the Gap. I nearly forgot his best line. When I was like, "Are you sure?" to buying me the shirts, he responded, "Don't worry, honey, I made a lot of money on my CDs." Well, I won a contest with Radio Disney to see a Seattle Sonics game with the band, Jump 5. I was 10 or so at the time, and it was pretty freaking cool, not so much to brag about now. A friend of mine got to meet Roger Bumpus, Squidward from SpongeBob, and overheard him curse. My friend said, "Squidward, you said a bad word." Roger turned to him, looked him in the eye, and said, "The frick I did." He then chatted for about 30 minutes and took a picture. Those are sentence enhancers. In high school, 2000 or so, I won a contest where you got to have dinner and meet Kane, the wrestler. We didn't really eat with him since he wore a mask, we sort of ate in the room with him there. He got a bunch of food to go and presumably ate it on his way to the next destination. The character of Kane didn't really talk, so there wasn't much interaction besides a handshake and a photo. It wasn't a bad experience, but I kind of thought there would be more to it. 2 months ago, in December 11th, it was the first Foo Fighters concert in Mexico, and just a couple of days before I happened to win a meet and greet with the band. I was so excited to meet my favorite band. All the band members are so awesome to hang out with, although the meet and greet is only like 10 minutes. I was able to chat with every member of the band, take a pic with all of them, except for Taylor. Pat gifted me one of his guitar picks, the band signed me a vinyl, and Dave Grohl took a selfie with me. It was one of my best days ever. I met Hanson by winning a drawing thing they do for their fan club after most shows. I've been a huge fan since I was 12. The three of them arrived looking rather glazed over, shook our hands and took pictures without asking us our names, or saying anything other than a polite greeting, and went on their merry way. Polite but impersonal. You could definitely tell that they'd been through the motions too many times. My mum won a radio contest to hang out with Ludacris and I got to tag along. It was pretty cool, he's an awesome guy. He had complaints about whoever thought it was necessary to tell the caterers to bring so much chicken. He just talked about what his life was like and what it's like now. He learned everyone's name and signed a ton of stuff. Didn't get to spend as much time with the band though, just a meet and greet, a few questions and a quick show. It was fun, the band is awesome. Also, they love to have fans come up and sing with them, which is one of the coolest things I've seen a band do in a while. In 2001, I won a trip to Hollywood and a meet and greet with Jennifer Tilly. She was an absolute peach. Friendly, bubbly, personable, gorgeous. Everyone was telling how much they enjoyed her in Bullets Over Broadway. I was the only one who told her that I loved her in Bride of Chucky. She giggled and told me that was her favorite too. I've loved her ever since. That's sweet. I imagine doing a schlocky horror film would be tons more fun than most other productions anyway. Awesome. When I was maybe 12 to 13 years old, there was a contest on the radio to win a free lunch with Buzz Aldrin. First successful trip to the moon and the second guy to step foot on the moon. Apollo 11. At a Planet Hollywoods, or some similar themed restaurant. The question on the radio was simple. Name the 3 men in the Apollo 11 missions. My mum, who was driving me to basketball practice, swore the third guy was named Shepard or some other name. But I, a kid who was into space for a bit, knew that it was Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. My mother pulled the car over, called in, got through, and used my answer instead of hers. We won. I got to skip school to go to the restaurant and get a free lunch. I barely got to meet Buzz Aldrin though, and this was probably around 1997 to 1998-ish, so Buzz was in his mid to late 60s. He had a table set up, and he was signing autographs. I bought an original Apollo 11 poster my mum had saved away in the closet. Totally forgot how or why she had a vintage 8x10 glossy prints of all the astronauts and a super cool metallic print poster. But basically, I said hello to an old man, told him I knew the answer to a radio show, got some things signed and a photo was taken. Then I sat down and ate a burger with my mum. Pretty but hey, I got to skip school. In conclusion, won a radio contest with Buzz Aldrin of Apollo 11. I was pretty young and I didn't care. A couple of years ago, I did a science history project on what was going on at NASA ever since we landed on the moon. Well, one of the bits I was excited about was the trip to the moon to bring back a whole bunch of samples. Harrison Schmitt was the first and last pure scientist to go to the moon. Most of them are pilots and ex-military. He was a geologist, to be exact. He brought back 218, I think, pounds of moon rock, including helium-3. I called him for a project, but I kept getting his personal aide. She said she would have him call me back ASAP, but I didn't get a call for a week. Then I called like 3 times in a row, and I hear a little old guy on the other side of the phone introduce himself. I talked to him for like 45 minutes, shaking the whole time. I asked him questions like, how did he regulate body temperature? He said, the sun actually made it get quite hot inside the suits while they were digging for rocks, so they had what he described to be liquid long johns. Asked him about his work with helium-3 and nuclear fusion, and he said no one's excited about science anymore, so there's not as much funding as there needs to be. Last, the cheesy question of, what does weightlessness feel like? And he replied that it felt like never coming back down while jumping on a trampoline. I ramble, but he was a really nice guy. When I was 3, 1993-ish, my mum won tickets to go see the Wiggles at the Fremantle Town Hall. Anyway, once the show was over, me and my friend kept on dancing and playing in the hall while our mothers talked. We were only 4 left. As the Wiggles were leaving, they noticed us and played with me and my friend for about 20 minutes. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My dad worked on Ninja Turtles 2: Secrets of the Ooze. I got to meet the Ninja Turtles, hold Leonardo's swords, and hang out on set in the junkyard scene with the Foot Clan. It was kind of a big deal. Just a little extra info, I also got to visit the laboratory that the ooze was housed in that the Foot Clan stole it from. Also, I've told this elsewhere, but it's one of my coolest memories I have. After visiting my dad on set, my mum and I have to go leave, and as we drive outside of one of the giant sound stages, there are 2 guys, a prop master and costume guy, machining something metal. Sparks are flying off this workbench. Hard to tell what it was at first. As we get closer, I realized that what I'm looking at is none other than Shredder's helmet. But not just Shredder's normal helmet, it's the helmet of Super Shredder. Helped install Tom Hanks' home office, computers, printers, etc. He was really nice, does that count? He gave the 2 of us cookies. Computers? Printers? I thought he only liked typewriters. They're not AOL compatible. A friend of mine had cancer back in 2nd grade. The Make-A-Wish Foundation set him up to go with a friend to meet Fall Out Boy. I got to be that friend. We got front row tickets to one of their concerts and we got to go backstage and meet them. I don't remember a lot of it, but they were really cool dudes and gave him a signed guitar, so that was cool. In '96, I won a contest to meet Adrian Paul of Highlander. We chatted about nerdy stuff, and years later, when I had my firstborn child, he contacted me to give congratulations. I still to this day don't know how he had my number or knew we were expecting. Pretty cool all around. I won a contest for a meet and greet with Cascade, general admission floor tickets to his AmITheA show, and VIP tickets to his after-party. Cascade was great. He came on the tour bus after the show, and I was able to talk with him about his favorite tracks and how it was like to be a DJ as well as the past gigs he went to. He really loves his fans, and I was lucky to get an autograph and picture with him. Some other people weren't so lucky because of Cascade's time constraints. Overall, a pretty awesome night. I found out I won at 3 p.m. on the day of the show, so I was kind of ecstatic. I was in the middle of stressing out for a licensing exam I was studying for, so this was the perfect stress reliever. Not to mention, I only spent $20 the whole night. Back in 2009, a friend of mine got us backstage for 9 Inch Nails for a quick band meet and greet. Trent had been someone whose music got me through adolescence, so I was pretty amped to meet him. When it came time, I walked up, we did the standard, everyone pose for the photo, and afterwards I said, "This is random, but I've got to know, are you a Dig or Reddit guy?" He looked at me, and I'll never forget this. "Actually, dude, Kevin Rose is a good friend of mine. I'm definitely a Dig guy." Well, I'm the co-founder of Reddit." "Geez, I'm sorry, dude." I thanked him for the photo and walked away. It was still a great show, and things worked out okay in the end. The moral of that story, kids, is to never meet your idols. Back in 2009, Dig was our chief competitor. It wasn't a platform for communities, just a single community, but the social news part was similar enough that everyone called us competitors. For anyone wondering, the person writing this story is verified as the actual co-founder of Reddit, and I'm honestly just including him on here because I can't believe that his testimony came up in my scriptwriting process about meeting celebrities. When I was 15, Tweekend had just been released. I got one of the first copies, which had a contest to win tickets to Cyberfest. A huge concert, 5 stages or something, with backstage VIP passes to meet the Crystal Method. I won. I never win anything in my life. Never ever. My mom wouldn't let me go. I didn't have an appropriate person to go with and give me a ride, someone she was sure wasn't on substances, and she didn't want to chaperone me. Goodbye $200 tickets, goodbye. I still haven't forgiven her for that. That's fricked up. I could maybe understand couldn't chaperone, but didn't want to is not a good enough excuse for making your kid miss something that cool. I totally agree. I mean, I went to the Justin Bieber movie, for Christ's sake. My eardrums will never be the same. This guy's mom should have bit the bullet and just gone to the concert. I won a contest to see and hang out with Less Than Jake perform an acoustic guitar concert at a guitar store. They were extremely nice and even drove me to their concert that was later that night. I always remember that it was in November because we talked about Thanksgiving traditions and they each talked about how awesome certain foods their grandmas made were. When I was like 8 years old, I got a backstage pass to a 98 Degrees concert. The Baha Men were the opening act, and my dad and I got to hang out backstage with them for like an hour. They were the nicest dudes. My dad told them I liked to sing, so they let me sing My Heart Will Go On for them. Then they autographed a CD for me and gave me a shout-out at the concert. Never got to ask them who let the dogs out, though. Me and my cousin hung out with RuPaul once. He tricked some random guy into thinking he was an actual woman. It was pretty funny. I know we had pics, but I honestly can't find them anymore. Through a really convoluted connection, I was able to hang out backstage with The National, specifically with the drummer Brian Devendorf. He was extremely nice and went out of his way to pay attention to me and my friends. In retrospect, I feel bad because he seemed exhausted after playing a hell of a show. But he was still so intent on being sociable with us rather than just zoning out and having some beers, which probably would have been 1,000 times more appealing. He told a cool story about jamming with Bruce Springsteen, and then said he felt awkward about telling the story, as if I would think he was bragging about being a rock star. I think everyone involved was just interacting on a weird self-conscious level, which reached its apex when my friend, who was super drunk, asked him, "So what do you do exactly?" Having just watched the entire show and spent a good 20 minutes with the guy, we politely excused ourselves and let him move on with his evening, almost immediately after that. When I had cancer, my aunt asked me who I wanted to meet that was famous. I asked for Rick Mercer. 4 days later, he was on my couch drinking an Alexander Keith's. We ended up exchanging numbers, and we have been friends ever since. He even got me and Alex Lifeson of Rush to become friends. Not the exact type of answer you're looking for, but better than a friend of a friend met. Ooh, I've got one. When I was real young, my dad and me went to go meet Robert Englund. He was signing autographs and he was saying it was always nice to meet his fans when my dad said, "My sister-in-law is terrified of you." Englund responded, "Is she home? Do you have her number?" Robert Englund, my dad and I went over to a payphone where he dialed the number and waited for her to pick up. My aunt said, "Hello?" Robert Englund, as Freddy frickin' Krueger, "Is this the sister-in-law?" "Yes, who is this?" "I'll be seeing you in your dreams tonight." Then he hangs the frick up while cackling like a madman. So yes, sometimes meeting your heroes is as awesome as you would expect. Once I won VIP tickets and a meet and greet to go meet the Dirty Heads. I arrived, did the usual pictures with the group, and then we went on the tour bus to hang out before the show. Absolutely the most boring people I've ever met. I'm sure it's because they were on Green Herb, but 2 of them laid down for a nap and the rest were just smoking and chatting amongst themselves. I ended up just chatting with the tour manager. I would have rather just stayed inside the venue and met people there rather than the band. Glad it wasn't for the entire day. Maybe 15 years or so ago, my friends and I went to a horror convention in New York. One of the featured guests was Tom Savini. At the time, my friend Tony was super into horror makeup and a big horror movie buff, as all of my friends were. At any rate, I guess none of us knew Tom was going to be there. So when Tony found out, he got wet his pants excited about it. I've never been the starstruck kind, so I was sort of weirded out by his behavior, but figured he'd cool his jets when he finally got in line to meet the guy. Nope. Tony's steadily getting more and more visibly anxious and he keeps telling me, "Guy's my childhood hero, you know, man?" I get it, I've loved Savini too since I was a kid, but I guess Tony just got super stoked for meeting the guy or something. So we get to the front of the line and I shake Tom's hand and go, "I love your work, man, keep doing what you do." And I turn to Tony expecting him to introduce himself, and Tony literally has his hands covering his mouth in that 7-year-old girl who just met a Disney princess at Disneyland pose. Except this is a burly, bearded 27-year-old wearing an Eraserhead t-shirt. We stand there for like 5 horrible seconds, and I kind of turn to Tom to say something on Tony's behalf, and I get about a quarter of the syllable out of my mouth before Tony blurts out, "Childhood hero!" and runs out of the conference room, leaving me standing there with a very bemused Tom Savini. I don't even remember how I recovered, I just think I said something along the lines of, "He's a really big fan of yours, thanks for your time," and walked with about as much dignity as I could muster. I didn't win anything, but I did make Steve Martin uncomfortable. My then-wife bought tickets to see him receive the Mark Twain Award for Comedy at the Kennedy Center. My wife and I had been out at a bar and I was finishing my gin and tonic. I ordered a second. As the bartender delivered it, the lights flashed. That's the indication that it's time to get seated. I tossed my gin and tonic down my throat and headed toward the ticket ripper lady. As she inspected our tickets, I asked, "I'm sorry, where's the closest men's room?" "Up the stairs and to your left." "Thank you." And I went up the stairs and turned to the right, because I'm an idiot. But I saw a sign that said men's room. Good enough for me. I headed for the door, I peed, flushed, and turned around and washed my hands. No paper towels, no regular towel, nothing. I'm in a suit. I can't exactly wipe my hands on my pants. I'm stuck. I finally just decide to leave my wet hands held in front of me like a surgeon freshly scrubbed for surgery, and I leave the men's room. And I find my wife telling Mr. Steve Martin, "No, I don't really get your comedy. We're here because my husband is a huge fan. Oh, here he is. Roman, Steve, Roman." I blurt out, "I really am a huge fan." And he sticks out his hand for a reluctant handshake. I stick my still dripping wet hand in his and shake vigorously. "Congratulations on the award, Mr. Martin. Sorry about the wet hand, I just peed. We should be getting to our seats. It was an honor to meet you." And with that, I let go of his hand, and my wife and I left for our seats on the exact opposite side of the balcony. Just before we rounded the corner, I looked back and saw Steve Martin standing beside his balcony door, looking at his wet hand. I knew what was going through his mind. I can't even wipe my hands on my pants, I'm wearing a stupid suit. Medical professionals. What's the best reaction you've seen from a dad during the birth of his child? I've been told that my dad's response to my entering this world was, "It's a person." I was born in the 80s and the ultrasound technology wasn't that great. What my parents didn't know was that instead of one baby, there were 2. Our hearts were beating at the same time and they could never really tell the gender, so they thought it was just one baby. So I came out. Then my mum says, "Doc, I still feel pain." And he looks and says, "I see another head." Apparently my father said, "What the frick? Whose baby is that?" And then my sister popped out. They were obviously floored. When I was born, my dad pulled out a Sharpie and drew a star at the bottom of my foot, to make sure they didn't lose me. Fun fact, if you do that to a premature baby, it can leave a permanent tattoo, because the skin isn't done yet. The more you know. So if I wrote "Made in China" on a preemie baby's foot. I was a C-section baby. A couple of years ago, the topic came up with my parents while drinking. I mentioned that this sounds kind of gross. My father looks me right in the eye and says, "Have you ever seen Alien? It was just like that." I've seriously threatened my wife with watching the Alien trilogy while she was pregnant. I almost passed out at the first C-section. We named our eldest daughter Ripley as her ultrasound photo made it look like she would emerge teeth and claws flailing. When I was born, my father, who's a gynecologist himself, came from watching me do my big entrance, or exit depending on how you look at it, and said to my mum, "You're not gonna believe what you just did." I was over 10 pounds at birth. For some reason, when they mentioned that their father was a gynecologist, I imagined him holding up a judge's number rating once the baby came on out of there. I don't know why, other than that his job would make him maybe a little more detached from the emotion of it all. Some more comments to follow. My uncle was 13 pounds when he was born in the late 1930s. My grandmother was 5'1" tall and he was her first child. That woman had a uterus and a hoo-ha of steel. No other explanation. Apparently she couldn't feel her legs properly for about 3 months afterwards. I was 11 pounds even. My mom came so close to breaking my dad's arm, they gave her a rolled-up blanket to squeeze instead. Luckily, I was a pretty quick birth, 5 hours, I believe. My dad went to the hospital to visit me and my mum at the time. After hearing a baby's screams so loud you could hear it in the elevator, he turns to the nurse with a silly grin on his face and tells her, "Well, this one has quite the vocal cords. I'm feeling sorry for his parents already." She turns to him and tells him, trying not to laugh, "You're telling me, it's yours." My dad missed my birth because he was choking on a sandwich. Like he was super excited and choked, or just an unfortunate coincidence? My dad missed my birth because he was buying a lottery ticket one state over. My parents weren't married and I was unplanned, and if my mum is telling the truth, he didn't want me at first and had wanted her to get a termination. It was only until after he held me for the first time that he realized he wanted me. And he's been a very good dad, thankfully. A story comes to mind of a friend who, when his son was born, just started crying hysterically and hugged everyone. The doctor, nurses, he even ran out into the hallway and hugged people visiting other patients. Always makes me smile when I think of it. My friend told me his story. He was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. So, he was a little purple when he was born. His mum couldn't see what he looked like. His dad told her, "He looks like a California raisin." I actually had the reverse problem. I was hyperoxygenated and was red. My dad actually said, "Put this one back, she's not done yet." My husband coddled our first son because I wanted him to have something with his son I could never have. I saw him holding this red, wrinkly, swaddled little baby and said, "Oh, look, they dressed up a potato like Mother Teresa." My dad is a carpenter and was at work when he was told that my mum was in labor with me. His reaction? He went into a shocked stupor and accidentally shot his thumb with a nail gun. And that's the story of why my then 11-year-old sister had to fill out my birth certificate. Did she get to name you too? Be honest, is your name Pooh-Face on your birth certificate? My friend got to name his little brother, named him Leonardo after a ninja turtle. My birth was both a terrifying and wonderful day at the same time. My mother hemorrhaged pretty badly, so my dad had this turbulent hour in which he was both crying with joy over the birth of his first child and also with terror at the thought of losing his wife. The doctors wouldn't let him back in the room while they were trying to save my mum's life. So apparently for this hour, all he did was pace the hallways outside the room holding me, and refusing to let anyone else near me, as if he was already preparing for it to just be me and him. My dad has never stopped being an utterly devoted and emotional father. To all those who asked, yes, my mother survived. At a forceps delivery last night, the dad-to-be was so horrified and impressed by the amount of pain his wife had gone through during her labor that he phoned up his own mum to say, "Thanks." I'm afraid to ask. Forceps delivery? Baby won't come out easily from the birth canal, so the doctor grabs its head with forceps and helps out. Usually leaves little dents because the baby's head is soft, but those straighten out afterwards. Note, usually straighten out afterwards. Multiple Redditors still retain scars and elongated heads. Thanks for the nightmares, guys. I think I finally decided to never give birth. When I was born after 13 hours of labor, my dad looked at my full head of black hair and blue eyes, looked at my mum and said, "Are you sure she's mine?" My grandfather was the one the nurses let carry me back to my room post-cleanup, and when my mum asked if I was okay, he said, "Yeah, I don't think the extra 2 toes will be a big hindrance," which led to my mum frantically tearing the blankets off to check my toes. Basically, the men in my family are buttholes. My brother was born about a year after me, and my mother had gone into false labor so many times that she only knew she was really in labor when she couldn't sleep that night. Anyways, later at the hospital, the doctor said that she was going to be in labor for a lot longer, so he went and ate dinner. She wasn't in labor for much longer. My grandmother delivered the kid and was holding him when a nurse walks by and says, "You can't do that." My grandmother retorts with, "Well, I'm not going to put it back." That doesn't sound like a very good nurse to me. No, that doesn't sound like a very good nurse. What did she think the grandmother was going to do? I imagine there was a fair bit of shock involved with realizing that a patient's family had delivered the baby instead of the hospital, but still. My father, up until I was born, had not seen a newborn baby, like ever. Naturally, he assumed that all babies look like they do in movies or commercials. As you can imagine, he was quite disappointed when an alien-looking thing is handed to him and introduced to him as his daughter. He handed me back to the doctors and went outside for a smoke to calculate how much all of the plastic surgeries were going to cost. Newborn babies are kind of gross-looking, sticky and covered in baby cheese. Baby cheese? Well, now I'm not finishing the rest of my sub, thanks. My own husband, during my first C-section, the doctor asks if he wants to look over the curtain at the baby being delivered. He looks over. Looks back with a look of horror. "What's wrong?" "Your insides are on your outsides." I will never forget the look on his face or the sound of his voice. "They're ripping you apart," is what my husband said in that exact situation. "They're tearing you apart, Lisa." When my mum gave birth via C-section to my brothers and I, triplets, the doctor asked my dad if he was okay watching the operation. My dad's response, "Oh yeah, it just looks like you're gutting a deer." My mum watched the second C-section, my husband had watched the first, and it fully satisfied his curiosity about where babies come from. She told me later that they hauled everything out, cut out the baby, then according to her, they stuffed you like a turkey to put everything back in. When I was born, they took me off immediately to clean me, take my footprints, bundled me up, and whatnot. I guess the two nurses were in a bit of a hurry and were doing both at the same time, and I managed to get a print of my left foot twice instead of a left and a right. Apparently, upon seeing the prints, my father became extremely distressed and literally ripped the blanket off me to make sure I didn't actually have two left feet. When my older sister was being born, my dad was in the room. He was so excited to watch that he screamed, "Honey, you gotta see this!" My mum said deadpan, "I'm a bit busy, can I get back to you, dear?" Kind of on topic, my mum said that when she woke up my dad to tell him her water broke, he jumped out of bed and started sweeping. She asked what the frick he was doing and he said, "I have to clean, the baby is coming." Just imagine what he's gonna think of these floors. Get out the fine china. According to my parents, I was a super fast delivery. Like so fast that the doctors and nurses had stepped out of the room to go to attend to someone else, and my mum grabbed my dad and told him to get ready to catch me. My dad didn't even have time to put on gloves and had to catch me, baby gunk and all. Apparently he smiled, passed me to the nurses, who came rushing in, kissed my mum on the lips, then leaned over and vommed everywhere. In conclusion, baby gunk and spew. Medical professional here. We were trying to get mum to push for at least 10 seconds with each attempt at getting baby out. So I'm counting down from 10 and ask the dad to join in just as baby's head appears. 10, 9, 7, 4, 7, 3. The guy was so excited and nervous and caught in the moment that he forgot how to count. One of the most precious moments I've gotten to be a part of. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My mum wanted to deliver me naturally, but there were complications. My head was way too big. My mum was still trying to push when the doctor realized he would have to perform an emergency C-section. Apparently they put the bars up on the side of my mum's bed, rushed her out of the room at full speed and turned the lights off, leaving my dad stranded alone in a hospital room by himself. He said he didn't know what to do, so he just sat down, still in the dark, and waited for someone to get him. A little over an hour later, a nurse came in to prepare the room, found my dad and brought him down to the nursery to see me. I laughed so hard just thinking about my father sitting alone, in the dark, in a random room in a hospital while I was being born. My father's son is a very well-educated, well-spoken man. He was with me in the hospital room when I gave birth, and the first thing he said after seeing our son the first time was, "Oh my God, look at his balls." They are huge on a newborn. Now I'm curious, but I don't want to search for baby balls. Oh, here you go, attached pictures and hyperlink, for educational purposes. Wait, NSA, Prism, frick! Well, you took one for the team there, pal. My mum went into labor late in the evening. My dad was asleep, he had to work early. She went in and said, "The baby is coming, get up." He replied, "Calm down, it's fine, go have a cold bath." So she had my grandma take her to the hospital. In my dad's defense, if he sleeps as heavily as me, he probably wasn't even awake for this. My biological father was out drinking while I was born. My mum's best friend and the man I consider my father was there the whole time and used to tell me all the time how I could fit in one of his hands. Each time he told me, he looked teary-eyed. I'm curious as to whether this was a small or premature baby, or whether the fine father figure in question was in fact an enormous giant, or whether he was rocking gloves like Uncle Jack from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I was born on Father's Day, haha, funny story. My dad got tennis rackets and tennis balls as a Father's Day gift, so he was playing with them in the basement, hitting balls against the wall when my mum went into labor. So she yelled at him from the top of the stairs that the baby was coming, and my dad, he says, "Okay, dear, I'll be down here playing tennis." She was livid. I was born in the 80s and my dad was in the operating room. I have a few older brothers who are all born naturally, but bro number 3 did some damage on the way out, so I was born via scheduled C-section, something my parents weren't really used to. My parents didn't know the gender of their new baby, me, ahead of time, so it was going to be a surprise. The surgeon put his hand in my mum's abdomen to reach for me and yelled to the room, "It's a girl," before getting me out. My dad was so excited, he just blurted out, "How can you tell?" And the surgeon looked at him with a sarcastic face and said, "She's wearing earrings." When my dad was born, my grandpa wasn't even there. He was asleep in the lobby of the hospital. The doctor had to go and find him to tell him he was a father. When he came into the delivery room and the doctor showed him my dad, he only had one thing to say. "I thought they were supposed to be cute." My dad always said I looked like an undercooked lizard. It was a Sunday and my mum was in labor with me. The doctor comes in and asks, "How's it going?" Mum, "Oh, I'm feeling…" "Oh no, the football game. The Bears are playing and how's it going?" My dad, "Up by 7. I was delivered by C-section, but apparently my mum's contractions were so intense that while she was holding my dad's hand, she squeezed so tight that she broke it. Mind you, my dad is 6'4" with huge hands and my mum is only about 5'5". The day I was born, my dad took me down every hall in the hospital and showed me off to everyone who would look. "Look how beautiful my little girl is." My mum said he was gone with me for over an hour. "That is just the sweetest thing," put a big grin on my face. "Look at this beautiful thing that I made." "All by myself." Well, me and my wife, we get to keep it. I was in the OR assisting with a C-section. Dad was there and he passed out and crapped himself. I thought that was pretty fantastic. My dad likes to tell the story of my birth over and over. They knew I would be born early. At 6 months, the doctors realized they couldn't keep me in any longer. They warned my dad that I wouldn't cry because I was so premature. Not only did I come out mad as hell, but I screamed my little head off too. They told my dad that at 2 pounds I only had a 5% chance of survival. 1973, mind you. I proved them wrong on all counts. My dad broke his back a few days before my mum went into labor with my brother. He was still in the hospital recovering from surgery, not able to walk around yet. My mum went into labor in the same hospital, and my dad demanded for a large enough room for 2 beds and that they wheel his butt down to her room so he could be with her. So my dad was laying in a hospital bed with a broken back right next to my mum when she had my brother. Thankfully not the one that I personally saw, but when my younger cousin was born, they had someone who was still training in the room observing and whatnot. Well, after the birth, she was in charge of taking care of the placenta. It dropped out of her hands and splattered all over the floor. My uncle was so disgusted by it that he fainted. For the birth of my oldest brother, my dad was holding my mum's hand. After he was born, my mum noticed he was still rubbing his hand. She asked him why he was rubbing it, and my dad said, "Well, he was squeezing my hand pretty hard." My mum asks, "Why didn't you tell me I was hurting you?" Dad says, "Well, I figured you were probably in more pain than I was." They've been married for 31 years and they both endured 4 more childbirths. Oh, my dad started freaking out so much when I was born that he stole my mum's oxygen mask for himself. The doctor started yelling at him about how the baby, me, needed the oxygen and had to steal it away from him. An older resident once told me the story about how he was working in New York City in his youth. There was a blizzard and a guy couldn't get his wife to the hospital in time. She gave birth at home and they brought them in to check up on the baby and mother. The dude is obviously in shock from the delivery and keeps saying, I told him, the baby, to stay in there. I told him to stay. Not an hour old and he's already stopped listening to me. Cracks me up every time he tells it. I'm just getting a hilarious mental image of this guy screaming, "Stop! Stop!" at his wife's hoo-ha. When I was younger and mad at my parents, I told them that I hoped I was switched at birth because there was no way I could be related to them. My mum said that wasn't possible because my dad literally never let go of me when I was in the hospital. He stayed with me the whole time because he was afraid someone would try to switch their crappy baby with his awesome baby. When my brother was born, his head was like a lemon being shoved out of a birth canal. My dad looked at him, then asked the doctor if his head was going to stay like that. He also wrote my name wrong on the birth certificate. I love my dad. When my sister was born in the 80s, my dad was ill-prepared for what newborns sometimes look like when they come out. Newborn skulls are kind of squishy, so when my sister got squeezed out, her head got a little squished and came out kind of conehead-like. In the delivery room, my dad smiled and said she was beautiful. Then he immediately exited, started crying, and called his friend Mike, a doctor, and said, "I don't know, man, there's something wrong with her. She came out looking like a frickin' hammerhead shark." His buddy had to convince him nothing was wrong and the head would go back to normal. Apparently he kept saying, "But she looks like a fricking hammerhead," over and over again. Dad here. My second child was born with bright, shiny red hair. Neither me nor her mum have red hair. There were about 10 or 15 assorted doctors, interns, nurses, etc. in the room. One of the interns sees the hair and immediately asks, "So, does red hair run in your family?" Every medical professional in the room sucks in a breath. They knew the dangers of asking such a question, probably from previous births. I looked the intern in the eye and said, "Yes, hers and mine." Everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief and immediately went back to what they were doing. Had I been quicker on my feet, I would have said something to the effect of, "No, wait, frick, I knew it," and stormed out while everyone glared evilly at the intern. It would have taught him a lesson. My mum loves to tell the story about my older brother, parents' firstborn kid, being born. They got to the hospital around 2 a.m. and after the initial examination, the doctor said it was going to be a while still and disappeared. An hour or so later, the nurse says it's getting to be time, so she goes to find the doctor and she can't. He's not answering pages or anything. There was a trash can at the foot of the bed, and my dad started freaking out, yelling about his first kid is going to be born straight into a trash can and what a horrible start to life that is. Another nurse calmed him down just in time for the doctor to show up yawning. He'd fallen asleep somewhere and nothing was waking him up. I worked in the local EMS system for about 6 years. In that time, I've become acquainted with a lot of the floor staff. Before my son was born, we arrived at the L&D unit and I was greeted by the staff warmly and excitedly. They made sure that both my then wife and I were treated with the best of care. Fast forward to 40 hours later. She had been in labor for 36 of them. I have not slept at all in that time frame, nor have I eaten. I was too nervous to leave her side, worried that I would miss the birth of my first child. The moment arrives, she's crowning. I'm there holding her hand and being comforting as I can when it hits me like a sack of bricks. Holy crap, you're about to have a kid. You, the irresponsible paramedic. You're about to be responsible for another human being. That played on repeat in my head. As my gorgeous son is delivered, the combination of exhaustion, stress, and hunger took me out. I remember the nurses say, "Wow, he looks really pale. Oh crap!" Then a whiteout and a thud. I waked up to the ED staff and some of my fellow EMS crews and L&D staff standing over me. To this day, I have not yet lived down that I, a 6'1", 300-pound ex-rugby player paramedic, was knocked out by a newborn who was 21 inches long, weighing 7 pounds 11 ounces. I love that story. What's the craziest advice someone has given you about your pregnancy? I was about 8 months pregnant. I said something at a family dinner one Sunday about how I was scared of labor. My gram shouts out, "You know, you should smoke a blunt." Now, my family's open about their green herb use. Most of my family will smoke from time to time, but my grandmother has never smoked in her life, so I was a bit confused. I just looked at her, and she keeps on going, "If you smoke blunts well into your labor, it will keep you calm and help the pain. I'll find you some green herb. Just smoke it in the bathroom of the hospital. But wear socks. You have ugly feet, and the doctor won't help you if he sees your cracked heels." My Grammy sure is something. I didn't take her advice, and the doctor delivered my baby even with my cracked heels. And once I had the baby and could reach my feet again, I made sure they weren't cracked anymore. Got severe itching all over my body during the 7th month. Did the routine test for liver function, all normal. Colleague advises, rub your husband's underwear which he has left for wash or laundry all over your body as a remedy for itching. No, I did not follow that advice. Oh, I was told that I need to shave down there or the baby will get carpet burn. Like, what? I feel like shaving down there would be the thing that gave the baby stubble burn. When I was pregnant past my due date, a coworker advised me to drink cod liver oil mixed with vodka. Apparently this mixture would upset my digestive system, give me horrible diarrhea, and thus trigger labor contractions. To clarify, I did not drink this combo to help with being overdue. I ended up several days later being medically induced and the labor delivery was swift and baby healthy. He's a grown man now. That I should drink her crappy MLM aloe vera juice every day. It's not advisable for pregnant women. I knew when I started this story collection that it would be full to bursting with homeopathic crap, and I think we've done quite well to have this be our first story about it, to be honest. My labor should be painless because Jesus died and erased the pain during childbirth, penalty humans got from Eve. If I feel pain, it's because I don't believe in Jesus' redemptive powers. That's not how that works. That's not how any of that works. Was told not to drink hot tea because then I would boil my baby. The reasoning for this advice was that the umbilical cord acted as a sort of snorkel from the baby to the mother's navel. If the navel was submerged, the baby wouldn't be able to get air. I had a coworker tell me that eating peanut butter, I was eating an apple with peanut butter on my lunch break, would give my baby cancer. I already thought she was the world's greatest idiot, so that nugget of wisdom was just confirmation. Don't raise your arms above your head. It will tangle the baby's cord and the baby will die. I came here having been given this advice as well. Even worse, the kid was born with the cord around his neck and needed to be delivered by C-section for other reasons. I could tell she wanted to say I told you so. Both mine had their cords wrapped and I had 2 C-sections, but cords wrapped aren't really that unusual. But I'm sure she would have loved to, I told you so, me. She's also the woman that told me she blames her 1970s potty training techniques for her daughter's bipolar. She feels like common practice was abusive and led to all of her daughter's mental health issues. Not to sit on stairs because it will cause you to have a miscarriage. People are crazy. According to my mother, everything can cause a miscarriage. Stairs, the silent killer. Coffee? Miscarriage. Tea? Miscarriage. Too much meat? Miscarriage. Not enough meat? Miscarriage. Sewing? Miscarriage. Paddling the school canoe? Oh, you'd better believe that's a miscarriage. Had 2 miscarriages before finally having my daughter. Just bad luck chromosomal abnormalities. But she made sure to remind me not to do all those things again next time. You know, just in case. Thanks for the subtle blame, Mom. Not me, but my sister. She had to have an emergency C-section when she had my niece. Her mother-in-law said she wouldn't be a real woman unless she had a natural birth. I was 18 when I had my son and was already terrified. Had to be induced and ended up having to have a C-section because labor just wasn't progressing and his heart rate kept dropping. For the first year and a half of my son's life, my mother told me I wasn't a real mom because I had to have a C-section. My mother-in-law said it's okay to drink mixed drinks. She went on to say that my husband was a margarita baby. I now call him that when he gets on my nerves. That is hilarious. It's like, okay, margarita baby, whatever you say. My mother-in-law, don't eat spicy foods or stand under the moon. Ugh. It's the full moon, not just the moon in general. This was a decade ago and my memory sucks. The spicy thing comes from the superstition that spicy foods will give your kid a birthmark. On my very first OB visit, first baby, they handed me a book about month-by-month pregnancy and said that if I had any questions, to just refer to the book. Then I said, well, what if the baby… She cut me off right there and pointed to the book and said, it's in the book. I changed OBs. For those who are asking, my question was not in the book. I had questions about the baby being premature. My brother and I were born very premature and I was going to ask her about it. And my baby ended up being born 3.5 months early and I had a lot of complications prior to that. Being high risk is not fun. But he's healthy now. Wow, that is complete crap. Imagine if every doctor did that. What an idiot. Walks into doctor's office. Hey doc, I've been feeling nauseous and have had severe stomach pains for some time. Did you check WebMD? What? Did you check WebMD?
Nah, I figure…
I can't help people who won't help themselves. Well, seems that in some rare cases, the medical experts can be just as infuriating as the people around us, I guess. But still, folks, 99 times out of 100, listen to the people who've trained in this rather than your crazy homeopathic hippie uncle.
Don't worry about the swelling and high blood pressure, that's normal,
says my midwife days before being induced due to preeclampsia.
Literally a life-threatening condition in some cases. A+ midwifery.
Oh, I've got this. The lady at the counter in the village bakery told me that I should smear my face with my man's splooge to counter pregnancy acne. It was the first time I'd ever met her. In high school, I read an article that said, in complete seriousness, women should give their men BJs every morning because morning sickness is caused by the body not being used to splooge. Younger me earnestly asked our medical teacher that question. Her tiny Christian body just froze. Looking back, it was a horrible idea and I can't believe I asked that. My entire family was super judgmental against breastfeeding for some reason. It was really strange.
How long are you gonna do that for?
You're taking the joy of feeding the baby away from everyone, said my mother when I was breastfeeding. She came around though and ended up getting judgy about women who choose to formula feed. I'm not judgy, by the way.
My mother-in-law said the same thing. She said I was preventing her son, my husband, from being a dad because I breastfed. Apparently the zillion other things he did as a parent besides feed her didn't make him a dad. What a nut.
I'm in my 30s. When we had our kids, my mum kept telling me how when I was a baby, I was fed exclusively on formula because she was told by her doctors it was the best. She kept saying it, almost, but not quite, judging us for breastfeeding our own children.
I honestly hear that from a lot of people our age. I'm just shy of 33.
I wonder if there was a formula marketing shift in that time period.
It's actually a real problem. 2 generations of women were convinced through false advertising that formula was safer and healthier. This led to a loss of cultural knowledge on breastfeeding. My in-laws were fully supportive of my breastfeeding until my baby reached 6 months old. Then it went from, "You're doing the best thing for him," to, "When are you weaning?" It doesn't expire, jeez.
Ooh, I get to vent. My 4-month-old has a cold and last week he was really fussy and wouldn't take a bottle at daycare. Until then, he'd been going back and forth between breast and bottle just fine. The daycare provider asked if I was still breastfeeding and if so, could I stop so he'd take a bottle better? No. He's back to normal now. I didn't fight to breastfeed through mastitis and a gigantic mother-fricking abscess just to quit at her convenience. Bottles are fine, but we like breastfeeding too. My grandmother made a comment about my weight gain with my first pregnancy around month 5. For reference, I started severely underweight at 87 pounds and was closely monitored by my doctor because of it. At this point, I was nearing 125. When I told her that the obstetrician-gynecologist was happy with where I was, she told me of her own doctor's advice in 1956. Smoke a packet of cigarettes per day to keep your weight down. The baby can gain its own weight after birth. Thanks but no thanks, Grandma. One person told me I would never be able to fit a baby out of my body because I wasn't big enough down there, and to just get a C-section. Not a doctor. A random person who had literally never seen down there. No, I'm not going to get major surgery just because you don't think I'm large enough. I've had 2 successful natural births. My mom's a petite woman and she naturally gave birth to my brother who was really close to 10 pounds. They became quite the attraction in the hospital as people saw the monster baby, checked the room number, then saw my mom and wondered how the heck he got out of her. Pretty sure my mother-in-law had the same thing happen. My husband was a 10-pound baby with the widest shoulders on record at his hospital. That butthole neglected to tell me this until we were married. I have the sudden urge to shake my snoring boyfriend awake and demand every single one of his birth stats, shoulder width included. Are you me? This is literally the story of me. My mom barely comes up to my shoulder. I was 10 pounds 6 ounces and nurses stopped by for like 36 hours to see the tiny woman who gave birth to the Thanksgiving turkey. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. While pregnant with me, my mum was told that drinking beer would help her baby develop and be nice and chubby. I was 5 weeks early and barely 6 pounds. It could have been substantially worse. Apart from being a really small baby, I didn't have any fetal alcohol-related health conditions.
Conversely, when my grandma was pregnant with my mum, her first, in the 50s, the accepted wisdom was that smoking while pregnant was a good idea for first-time mothers, because it lowered their birth rate, which was supposed to make labor and delivery easier. But low birth weight is extremely dangerous and makes the process harder. My mum was born 2 months early and weighed about 2 or 3 pounds. She was so tiny that my grandma dressed her in baby doll clothing and my mum spent her first month of life in the hospital's NICU. That's insane. I wonder what medical knowledge that's commonly accepted today will turn out in the future to have been disastrously wrong. That if you try really hard and stretch a lot, you too can have a natural birth. Not actually a bad plan, as long as you don't wind up not fricking dilating after 30 hours and have an emergency C-section due to fetal distress. Because I just didn't try hard and stretch enough. Taking a bath can cause a miscarriage. To be fair, it was from my husband's incredibly sweet grandmother who meant well. She was 92 years old at the time and hadn't been pregnant in a very, very long time. She also had a good number of miscarriages. My father-in-law and his sister are 15 years apart in age, so I think she was coming from a different place than most. One of my work colleagues was obsessed with recommending that I eat citrus fruits, especially the easy-to-peel cutie tangerines. She was convinced that it would give the baby a higher IQ in the long run. So not really about pregnancy advice, but someone told me to put baking soda in a cup and pee on it first thing in the morning. If it fizzed, I was pregnant with a boy. If it did not fizz, I was having a girl. If it didn't involve literal baking soda, this sounds like some of the kind of medieval tests people would conduct on themselves way back when. Like peeing on a potted seedling and its growth determining whether you're fertile or not. Silly idiots. When I found out I was pregnant a 4th time, 3 losses in a row, I heard so many from strangers. Mine isn't necessarily advice, but more open mouth insert foot. Are you sure this one's gonna work? I was also told that if I was on my cell phone or around my modem or router, it would cause brain damage to my unborn child. She's 4, perfectly healthy, no brain damage, and let's just say it took a lot of medical attention to get her to full term. What caused my miscarriages? They said my hormones couldn't sustain a pregnancy, and after the 3rd, I was told that with my hormone levels, getting pregnant again wouldn't happen. She was a surprise and the best one ever. It took an educated doctor that wanted the best outcome. Previous doctors just looked at my history and was like, sorry for your loss, maybe next time will go better. The best day of my husband and mine's life was finding out that she was alive, thriving, and having an amazing doctor who moved heaven and earth to make sure she'd make it. He was at work when I found out, and he actually yelled and his entire office heard him. He almost ran out of the office, he was more excited than me. Sitting with my legs crossed will cause a miscarriage. Don't take a bath, it'll cause a miscarriage. Lifting more than 5 pounds will cause a miscarriage. Wearing tight-fitted clothes? You guessed it, miscarriage. Spicy food could cause a miscarriage. I worked retail. A stranger informed me that morning sickness and smell sensitivity isn't real while I was heading to the bathroom to throw up. Also had a customer tell me that the baby isn't actually affecting my bladder. Had a 3rd customer tell me not to drink tap water. Can't remember why, probably causes miscarriages. My cousin tried to tell me that I had morning sickness because it's God's way of telling a woman she isn't ready for a baby. Had an anterior placenta, so we couldn't feel kicks until close to 30 weeks. My mum said there was no such thing and the reason we couldn't feel kicks is because I was fat. In conclusion, literally everything causes miscarriages and morning sickness is a lie. When I found out I was pregnant, a nurse friend of mine felt the need to rattle off an endless list of crap that could potentially be wrong with my baby. Another friend of mine, when I started telling people that I was pregnant after the 3 months and was accused of telling people too early, said, "It doesn't matter when you tell people, you could have a miscarriage at any point during your pregnancy." They both meant well, but really guys, just shut up. My grandma constantly told me not to argue with my husband because it would cause the baby to be fussy and difficult. Frozen cabbage leaves in the bra to help with swelling and pain due to breastfeeding. While it did feel awesome for the whole minute or so that they stayed frozen, they eventually turned to mush and made a mess. Advice I wish someone had given me: get a mattress protector, not just for when your water breaks. Carrying a big baby next to your bladder means the act of rolling over in a bed can cause leakage. And if you're too tired after the birth to take the baby to a changing table or the floor, you're going to want a layer of protection on your mattress. Soon as that diaper is off, the baby will projectile poop. Sheets and walls can be washed, but mattresses can't. Poop explosions are real. Prepare yourselves. Now I want to add a really good mattress cover or pad to my registry. And make sure you register for 2. When the baby pees all over the bed at 1 a.m. or your milk leaks everywhere in the middle of your night, you need a backup mattress protector for when the first one is getting washed. My mum was talking to my paternal grandma while pregnant with me, then winced because I was kicking her ribs. My grandma told her to swat it so it'll know. She wanted my mum to spank fetus me through her own belly for kicking her. After my mum told us that story, swat it so it'll know became a common response anytime someone was complaining about something. Well, I'm the husband and father, but a doctor told my 38 or 39-week pregnant wife that her condition was no excuse to not keep me satisfied in the bedroom. Not even sure why it was brought up. She was just getting a regular checkup. I wasn't even there. The doc busts out with this. Not her regular doctor. Her regular doctor was also off pregnant. She was not impressed, to say the least. So there's the advice. Being pregnant is no reason to not please your significant other. Did you pass along that helpful advice to her regular doctor? I'm sure she would have been delighted to hear that a colleague was dispensing pearls of wisdom like that. She did, actually, along with a letter to the head of medicine due to another incident. This was a new doctor and actually still on probation now. With my first baby, I had a random lady in a grocery store tell me to take a bath in bleach because it's good for the skin and for the baby's growth and development. I was mortified. I was told that heartburn during pregnancy meant that the child had a lot of head hair, had a crapload of heartburn, and kid had barely any hair. Oh, don't go swimming or the baby will drown, 25-year-old co-worker. All I could picture is the little nugget with a straw out of my hoo-ha to breathe. My friend's dad was a chiropractor. She told him that I'd had miscarriages. He told me, "No wonder, you'll lose every pregnancy with a pelvis like that." Freaked me out so much, and I guess I ruined the party by crying and leaving, and my friend was mad at me. I have back trouble, yes, but I have 3 children living. My adorable father-in-law told me I had to deliver naturally. If I had C-section, I wouldn't love my baby as much because I didn't suffer for him. First of all, the kid was comfortably sitting and was not turning around, you utter butthole. I was not about to risk my kid's life in a feet-first delivery, no sir. Second, a C-section is a major surgery and a pain in the butt, believe me, I did suffer. You try being cut open like that while awake and then deal with a feisty, colicky newborn while recovering from it. Third, really? I need to feel pain in order to love my child? I can't even. Fourth, you don't even have a uterus, old man. Zip it. Ah, that felt good. Not allowed to sew either using sewing machine or by hand. It will cause the umbilical cord to tangle. Just because you almost died carrying that one, don't let it stop you from having another one because all pregnancies are different. Okay then, I could potentially have 2 motherless children. Sounds like something a responsible adult should do. I had extremely high blood pressure and the placenta dropped so low the doctor said just bending over would cause a problem. They couldn't see the bottom on ultrasound and had to use the wand. I had such bad morning sickness, and then when that was done, I had acid reflux so bad I was throwing up 3 to 10 times a day. I didn't gain any weight my whole pregnancy and couldn't eat. Doctor said just the elevation in blood pressure alone was reason enough to never do it again. Currently pregnant and currently dealing with my mother who became an anti-vaxxer 13 years ago. Just found out recently when I mentioned I got my Tdap and flu shot and I asked if everyone in the family was caught up because the baby is due next month and the flu season is right around the corner. She called me a freaking idiot for putting rotting DNA in my body while pregnant. She refuses to get a flu shot, so I refuse to let her see her first grandchild. Not taking chances with my kid's life because you can't be bothered to do legitimate research or listen to me when I try and explain it to you. Identical twins. What's the craziest way which you've abused your powers of mistaken identity? I had a friend who had an identical twin, and they both spent the first month of university, they went to the same school, convincing everybody that there was actually 3 of them and that they were triplets. By the time they decided to come clean, nobody would believe that there wasn't a third of them around somewhere. You can't trick me, I've hung out with Lucas countless times, etc. My dad is an identical twin. When he was dating my mum in college, he used to play a game with his twin. He'd call my mum and partway through the conversation, hand the phone off to my uncle. My uncle would see how long he could carry the conversation before he had to tap out and hand the phone off to my dad. Anyways, the first time my mum ever said, "I love you," to my dad, she was actually talking to my uncle. My uncle faltered, and that was when my mum realized what had been happening.
They must have straightened everything out because they ended up married and had me. But seriously, what a colossal strategic error on my dad's part. My brother and I had a sequence of 10 numbers memorized, so if anyone ever asked if we were telepathic, we could prove that we were. This was like 3rd grade. I know 2 sets of twins that have created their own language. One of them taught them to their kids, who are now step-siblings. I walked in one day and they were speaking what sounded like an alien language. They stopped for a second and stared at me because it had been a secret. My stepbrother ended up telling me, but I was amazed because it was a full conversation like it was completely normal. I just couldn't understand a word. My twin brother got me a detention for his dress code violation and neglected to tell me, which resulted in me almost getting suspended. In return, I failed his French test. My twin and I tried switching places for a day in grade school. It lasted all of 5 minutes because even though our teachers didn't catch on, her classmates knew and kept asking what I was doing in their class and where my sister was. My sister and I did the exact same thing. In 1st grade, the teacher had the class split up into different groups with my sister and I in different groups. After a little while, our teacher moved the groups so that I was moved from the craft table to the reading section, and my sister the opposite. I forget what happened, but our teacher had to leave the room for some reason, and I was able to convince my sister to switch places with me because I was a small child and wanted to do anything but read. When she came back into the room, she immediately noticed something was off and went to go get our mother, who was right across the hall with her kindergarten class. She immediately pointed out who was who, and we were sent off to the principal's office. This is the only story I have about us switching places because my sister respects authority and never wants to use being an identical twin to our advantage. That feels like a whole bunch of potential gone to waste. What's the point in having a superpower like an identical twin if you can't use it to mess with people? Here's a following couple of answers from people who weren't twins, but didn't let that stop them from abusing that power. I've run into people, not close friends, just acquaintances, I haven't wanted to talk to and have pretended to be my identical twin to avoid annoying small talk. Oh, I'm sorry, you must think I'm my name. We're twins, this happens a lot. I'm not a twin, but had my whole class of 4th graders convinced that I was, and that my twin was also a teacher, and we would switch places and teach the other's class occasionally. It was hilarious hearing kids' theories on how to decide when I was me and when I was my twin. I went to kindergarten all the way through to the 12th grade with fraternal brother-sister twins. During the last who gives a frick anymore weeks of senior year, they switched places for a day and just refused to admit that they weren't each other. While in Iraq, I signed all of my legal rights over to my brother. That gave him legal rights to my bank account. When my family was in financial trouble, I gave the okay for my brother to take money out of my account. The bank refused to honor the legal documents and would not let my brother take money out. Next day, he went to the same bank with my passport and took the money out of my account anyway. My brother went to a job interview pretending to be me. I, or he, got the job and I've been working there for just over a year now. My father's father had an identical twin and they were both in the Air Force. First trick was that my grandfather was blind in one eye due to a childhood accident while running with scissors. His brother went and took his physicals for him, but they caught them just before pilot training. Fast forward, they're both active duty during World War II, and one is stationed in California while the other is stationed somewhere at a US base in the Pacific. My grandfather, Earl, was the guy who would put pilots in their cockpit and make sure it was sealed correctly before they took off. Mind you, these pilots are flying the fastest aircraft manufactured at the time, and nevertheless, my grandfather tells them right before they leave, "I'll see you when you get there," with a wink. His brother, with the same last name, imagine Private Swenson or whatever, was the guy who would undo the cockpits for the pilots after they landed in the Pacific, and he would say to them, "Hey, you made it. I got here pretty fast, huh?" Producing the most astonished look of bewilderment and amazement one could muster. They ran this joke for quite some time and even got written up in the newspaper about it later on. I thought it was such a great old joke. Hope you guys liked it. My identical twin died. There are some people who knew him but did not know he was a twin. When I bump into them accidentally, they always freak out. I have identical twin brothers. As children, they constantly called each other ugly, which they did not get but made my mother laugh every time. They still do it today, mostly as a dumb old joke. One of my nicknames for my twin is ugly. Some of the others are Lefty and Spare Parts. When I was younger, me and my non-twin sister convinced our younger sisters, who were twins, that everyone in the world is born a twin, so you've got spare parts if you have an accident. We made up stories about our own twins and how much we missed them, but how they'll always live on as our lung or whatever. Then we asked them which one of them was the spare. Twins fighting is brilliant. They're so evenly matched. One of my high school teachers said she had her twin take and pass her driver's test for her. No one was ever the wiser. My dad is a twin, and every so often one would break up with the other one's girlfriend. Oh man. How could you say those things? How could you be so cold? I don't know. It's like I hardly even know you. Bye. I imagine however it actually transpired, it left the girlfriends pretty confused in some way or another. I went to a convention with two friends who were identical twins. They dressed the same one day, hoping to throw people off and have some laughs, which worked perfectly, at least until they got separated. Then they both ended up going around in circles using the "Have you seen someone who looks exactly like me?" line to try and find each other. My dad has an identical twin brother. This is his famous story. My family is Iranian, and it's mandatory for young men to serve in the army for a minimum of 2 years. They do have a few exceptions. For example, if your eyes are weak or if you can't see without glasses, then you don't have to serve. My dad had the weaker eyes between the two of them, so he failed his own exam. He took his brother's ID to the army officers and failed the exam again to get his brother out of that responsibility. I'm reminded of a story I saw here on Reddit about a really old man who was with his wife for like 50 years, eventually ends up passing away, and without ever having told anyone he had an identical twin. So his brother shows up to the funeral and chaos ensues. That would be an awesome story, like if the other old man's life is in shambles at the time, so he shows up and then decides to keep playing his brother, who's extremely successful and loved all over town. He fakes everything by acting hella confused about the funeral. I don't know, just a thought. 1. Took the SAT for my brother. 2. My brother had me go on a date with a girl he met online when he was away. How did the date go? Did he end up continuing to see her? Did she ever found out? I have so many questions, you need to explain. 2 weeks later, when he came back from the trip, he went on a date with her, and she didn't detect it. Later, when we told her, she couldn't believe it. We were all so entertained by this for a long time. There are some questions that the poster of the story never answers satisfactorily. How did the date go? Did she stay together with the original brother? Or the second one? Think of us nosy weirdos reading your stories when you post them. Dated a girl a couple of years ago that had an identical twin. They said they'd switch class schedules for a day and stuff like that for fun. I was able to tell them apart due to the way that they presented themselves. Everyone has slightly different facial expressions and stuff like that. For fun, my girlfriend would leave the room I was in and her twin would sometimes come in and pretend to be her. Rarely worked, fun game though, and no, I didn't have a three-way with them, so don't ask. Man, if you noticed that you were talking to the sister, you should have played it off like you didn't know. Then when your girlfriend came back in, said stuff like, "Oh man, you've never kissed me so passionately before, that was amazing." My sister and I were handed each other's picture forms on our senior year picture day in high school. We thought it might be funny to not switch them back, take each other's yearbook, school ID card pictures, and have a few people know we did it. Harmless shenanigans, right? Then one day at the end of the year, after SATs, AP tests, and college applications were all over, I got called into the principal's office. This had never happened to me before, and I had no idea why on earth I'd be called down, since I hadn't gotten into any trouble. I get there, and my sister has already arrived, and I'm just like, oh crap. Principal sits us down and tells us that when cross-referencing our school ID photos and the driver's licenses we provided at the SAT, College Board found a discrepancy and was investigating the possibility that we might have taken each other's tests. I hadn't even thought about that being a possibility, and all the blood went to my stomach. My sister and I freaked out, and as calmly as we could tried to explain what we thought was a harmless prank. But he kept a straight face and insisted that if there was any possibility that we switched tests, our scores would be invalidated. After about 10 minutes of explaining and reasoning with him about how we'd comply with any investigation, but we swear we took our own tests and so on, he calmly told us it was all a joke. I felt like I was going to pass out. He was laughing his butt off and saying things like, "Got you good," and reassuring us that everything was fine and that we should go back to class. Turns out that since we have family in the school district, the principal had heard that my sister and I switched and decided it would be brilliant to make us think our futures were in danger. In his defense, it was an objectively fantastic prank, and his delivery was so level and authoritative, it at no point occurred to us that College Board doesn't reference yearbook photos to confirm identities. Props to him for creativity, but what goes around comes around. In conclusion, sister and I switched places on a yearbook day. Our principal pranked us hard months later by making us think our life careers were in danger. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Not a twin, but Asian. Back in middle school, my friend and I took each other's classes for an entire day, and no one noticed.
I think the best one I ever heard was twins who worked super ultra overtime at the same job by simply pretending to be the same person and trading off shifts, putting in 120 hours a week or so. A teacher of mine who's a triplet told us that once she took an exam for her sister that she already took and studied for, got an A- for herself and an A for her sister.
And the third triplet got a D because the other two excluded her from the scheme.
Honestly, being an identical twin is not so much about cool pranks as it is responding to people who ask,
"Why are you so nice to them in chem class and then totally ignore me when I try to talk to you in English?"
Or this, most common problem, "Guy, hey, what's up? Love the new hair." Me internally,
"Do I know this guy? I didn't do anything special to my hair. Who are you? I can't remember who anyone is."
Then out loud,
"Hello."
"Guy, how brutal was that test the other day, right?" Me internally again,
"Maybe he's in my psych class. Wait, did we even have a test? Maybe just go along with it. Oh, I'm totally screwed for next week."
Guy, "Next week? The final's not until the end of the quarter." Finally,
"Oh no, he thinks I'm my twin. Should I say something? That'd be awkward. I'll look like an idiot for just pretending to know him. He might get embarrassed. Maybe I can just wing it and no one will have to know that I'm me."
At this point in the conversation, I decide if I should continue to be my twin or reveal myself. This is definitely my fault, in part, because I'm so bad at remembering faces. People in my classes, people at bars, people from past classes. I'll meet people on a smoke break and find out that, to my surprise, they've been sitting the next table over from me for a few weeks. Add twinliness into the mix and it's so awkward. Imagine the "is he waving at me" feeling all the time. I get that, plus a conversation. If they ask for help or make it obvious that they just want to chat, I tell them I'm the twin. My brother and I went to different colleges and didn't generally reveal to the friends we made that we each had a twin. One day, a group of people approached me in the street, calling me by my brother's name and asking me if I'd like to join them in the pub. I knew that my twin brother was already at the pub, so I said I'd bet them free drinks if I beat them to the pub in a foot race, even if I gave them a head start. They agreed and ran off at top speed while I stood there casually checking my watch and buffing my fingernails on my lapel, only for them to arrive exhausted and find me standing at the bar, drink already in hand.
It's doubly impressive that he managed to change clothes on the way to the pub.
I have a twin sister. I'm a guy. My little brother was born 2 years later on the same day. However, now that we're older, we look practically identical, close enough to fool his kids at least. When we do stuff together, we often get asked if we're twins. I answer yes, he answers no. This will need some backstory. My wife is a twin. Her sister and her both work at the same camp. My wife worked at the camp during the school year, while my sister-in-law worked during the summer when there was a lot more staff. Basically, they were trading places all the time, but staff of the camp would change during those times as well. Summer staff versus non-summer staff. So it was never really an issue. My wife worked mostly in the kitchen, while her sister worked as a counselor. Generally, the two were never seen together when they were both working there. It should also be said that my sister-in-law was often mistaken for a few other people around camp anyway, which only helped the situation in the end. At the end of the week, the groups of campers would do skits. One group of campers decided their skit would be about a machine that would multiply things. So my sister-in-law decided to help them out. The skit came down to the campers saying that my sister-in-law was such a hard worker that she needed a clone to help out around camp. At this point, the campers in this particular group knew about her twin, but most of the other campers did not. They turned on the machine and put my sister-in-law in. Out came her and a boy that had the same hair color and style, but that wasn't quite right. They got rid of the boy and put her back in. Out came a girl with a different hair color, but at least it was a girl this time. Next, the machine spit out a girl with the right hair color but not quite the same build. The fourth time, the machine spits out my wife. Being a nearly identical twin, this basically blew the audience away. In conclusion, my wife and sister-in-law freaked out some kids and even some adults with their shenanigans. What you guys don't understand, and maybe some other twins can back me up here, is that it's not so much tricking the teacher when switching classes as it is keeping all the other students quiet about it, since they can usually tell right away. At least for me and my brother anyways. My sister and I have picked on my partner quite a bit. We've tricked him in mostly harmless ways, but it's fun to watch his reaction. Other than that, we've always had the same schedules at school, so we haven't really taken advantage of our twin powers. I'm curious to see other responses.
I dated an identical twin in high school, and I was always terrified that they would frick with me. The only way that I could tell them apart was because my boyfriend had a dot on his forehead. But what if they'd drawn one on the other twin and had him pick me up just to mess with me? Ah, the anxiety.
Note to self, never date twins. Or perhaps I'll end up meeting someone that has a twin without telling me in any case, and then the charade will go on even longer. Oh God, this is terrifying. I worked in a locked psychiatric ward while my twin brother works in a local emergency room. According to him, he has had at least 2 scary as frick psych patients come up to him saying,
"Hey John, you crazy frick, how are ya?"
And then ensues a long, scary conversation that he is not me in. I knew a pair of identical twins in high school who fricked with people all the time. I quickly learned how to tell the difference out of self-defense, and they always gave me grief for ruining their fun. We'll call them Steve and Dave. Anyway, here's the story they told me. At their high school, they were both starters for the football team. One was a running back and the other the fullback. For 4 years, Dave blocked for Steve, as Steve got the yards, the touchdowns, and the records. In the final game of their senior year, they switched jerseys without telling their coach, and for one game, Steve blocked for Dave. Dave set the school's single-game rushing record under Steve's name. Because they were blabbermouths, the story got out and the coach was teed off at them for lying and for making him look like he'd put the wrong brother at the running back the whole time. I had a good friend growing up whose dad was a twin. A group of us girls went to the movies one night. Twin's dad's daughter goes to the bathroom while we wait for her in the lobby. Wouldn't you know it, not even 5 seconds later, we see her dad in the distance, holding hands with another woman. We start freaking out, thinking we've caught her dad cheating. Friend comes out and we explain the situation, ready for battle. She laughs and says, "Oh, that's my aunt and uncle." Then she goes up to them and gives them a hug. My twin sister and I aren't really able to fully utilize our ability due to not living with each other for most of our lives, but we do like to have fun with it. If we visit each other's town with a new group of friends, we'll switch places with one another and always make the newcomer look like they're amazing at figuring out random tips and tricks of the city. On a more serious note, my sister and I switched places about 8 months ago in order to save her from a terrible boyfriend. My sister is too sweet to her to fly, but she really needed to dump this guy, so we switched places. I met up with the jerk at the bar and told him very honestly that him and I, my sister, couldn't be together due to his abusive nature. Not identical, but fraternal, still both girls, which makes more alike than not alike. We would usually say things at the same time, but that was a coincidence. When we realized this, we started doing it on purpose to creep people out, and it really creeped them out. One especially that I remember was in 8th grade. A dude always told my sister she confused her with me, so we knew that if he saw us together, he would say something along the lines of, "You're totally identical." So the time comes and he says that, so we go and say at the same time, "What are you talking about? We're totally different." The look on his face was priceless. I wish I could have recorded it. This doesn't really go with abusing my powers of identity so much as going out of my way to not be mistaken as my twin sister. She dated some D-bag in high school who literally could not tell us apart at all. He began pursuing her, but since he was an idiot, he didn't even really take the time to get to know the difference between us two. He would mistakenly hug me or be flirty or check me out or call my sister's name, all while my twin was standing 1 foot away. It became too awkward for me to the point where I just completely ignored his presence and didn't make eye contact when he was around, so he'd finally stop mixing us up. Sometimes that didn't work, so I would immediately sarcastically insult him and throw in a couple of dudes and bros to solidify the fact that I was the non-romantic twin. Even then, this moron couldn't read the flashing signs, so I just started to turn around and walk away whenever he approached. He eventually picked up that his twin was the one who wasn't a complete B-word to him. What's the most hilariously useless magic item you've ever had in Dungeons & Dragons? In my last campaign, my players got a hammer that shoots confetti and makes a party blower sound on crits. A dramatic moment happened where he had to put his pet owlbear down, as it was morphing into a monstrosity because of the big bad evil guy. Because the creature was on the ground morphing, he auto-crit. The beast lies there, writhing in pain, trying to hold on to its own self for as long as possible. You lift your hammer solemnly into the air, feeling the weight of not only the weapon, but the situation. As you bring it down, you feel flesh give as the skull has been pulverized from the transformation. The sound of teeth clacks against the ground, echoing in the room around you. The party looks at the ground, and a moment of silence consumes you all. So I'm doing my second video on Dungeons & Dragons stories in 2 weeks, don't hate. And yes, every time the chance to do this comes up, I'm going to leap at it like the hyper-obsessed nerd that I am. The +3 sword of Edward Tumbleton slaying. Edward Tumbleton was a tailor in a nearby city. They discovered a sword that was very effective at killing him. Just him. Neither the party nor any other person on the planet had any reason to kill the guy. The party ended up killing him by blowing up his shop with a fireball. The sword was never used. Poor Edward Tumbleton. I think at some point he got on the bad side of an artificer who told him, "I have a sword with your name on it," and it turned out to be true. Gave my party a sash of swimming, see retextured aquatic cummerbund. They put it on the donkey pulling their wagon and promptly forgot about it. I haven't though. 2 years later, I haven't. Haha, still waiting on the moment that the donkey will be the only one to survive the flood. The donkey is going to get sold or killed, and they won't remember the sash of swimming. That's what my party would do. The mug of pea warm chongo. Turn any liquid that enters its internal volume into, you guessed it, warm chongo, the temperature of fresh pee-pee. They threw it into the sea, and yes, while it would eventually produce an infinite amount of PWC, it didn't produce it faster than the various flora and fauna of the sea could consume it as current carried it away. The toils of all that be. Help not the primal fault. Rivers flow into the sea, yet still the sea is salt. I used to love making magical items that were off the wall. I felt like the game's items didn't reflect the silly stuff someone would make if they had the time and manic attention to detail. There's a devil called Chiton. It's chain-wrapped, chain-swinging, freaky, pain-loving Hellraiser type. My party fought one in a dungeon. He's wearing a unique amulet that makes chain. You place a piece of chain on the surface and the amulet starts slowly, magically generating a chain of the same dimensions. It only makes 10 feet a day, but over time you could make a few gold selling mundane chain. I just thought it was thematic and interesting. The party left the dungeon, went to town, found a smith, and poured their entire life savings into making 2 links of solid gold chain that would make Flava Flav weep. And I wept. What a fool I was. Reminds me of when my DM, tired of us breaking down doors, introduced adamantine doors on a massive castle, but he let us lift them off the hinges. We got so rich we decided to abandon the campaign. I gave one of my players a delicious magical sandwich that regenerated itself each day as long as you didn't eat the crust. It didn't offer any benefit when you ate it, it was just an infinite sandwich. That sandwich became a character in and of itself. The amount of time that was spent talking about the sandwich, its contents, the flavor, etc. was crazy. Every player described how their character would ogle the sandwich whenever it was brought out. That character is gone now, but she kept that sandwich right up until retirement. She spends her time in Candlekeep Library, devouring knowledge and also the sandwich. Wait, as long as you don't eat the crust, what if you cut it in half and separate the 2 halves? Would each half generate a whole sandwich as long as there were no bites taken out of it? It's the deep philosophical questions like this that keep me coming back to Reddit. Yeah, there are any number of minor items in D&D that are capable of changing the course of human or humanoid development when you think about their broader implications, if they were used to their best effect instead of just by a random bunch of idiot heroes. Fun stuff. Ring of fire detection. Range? Touch. I had a merchant selling some knickknacks, and one of them was a ring of fire identification. If you pointed it at something, it would declare in a loud, clear voice, "Fire," or "Not fire." Obviously useful when facing illusory flames, but for some reason the party didn't spring for it. A fire distinguisher? A rope that couldn't be tied, not even for a second. They were facing a dragon who loved puzzles and eating non-dragons. They gave him the rope and made the deal that if the dragon couldn't make a knot within an hour, then the dragon would need to let them pass through. Our party's DM gave us a magical, mysterious bag. When we opened it, we pulled out a turtle. We reach in again, thinking there must be something else to this bag. We pull out a rabbit. Still thinking that there must be something else, something more meaningful to this item, we reach in again and pull out a 9-foot-tall deer. It really was just a backpack that lets you pull out random animals. My bard proceeds to use Speak with Animals, then charms the deer to let us ride him. We named him Preston, and he's been our ridiculously massive means of transportation ever since. The rod of irony was a fishing rod that you could only find by fishing it up. Using it only fished up more rods of irony. We used them for firewood. I'd become a fishing rod salesman. They found a wand that creates a random and unique lock that incorporates itself into the substance it's used on, so it might make a suspicious recess in a stone wall or a brass-plated keyhole on a wooden door. If probed with lockpicks, you would encounter moving tumblers or some other appropriate but unique locking mechanism. It didn't magically create a compartment, it just made a lock. Even if you used it on a desk drawer, it never made a latch or bolt. So the drawer would open perfectly fine while having a useless metal cylinder with tumblers that weren't connected to anything. If you successfully picked the lock, it always felt like a real lock despite lacking the physical pieces, it would make a soft chiming noise and the lock would evaporate. The wand was a training tool used by a famous locksmith to challenge himself and his students. It had no practical application at all outside of that profession. It ended up being used by the druid, who had ranks in magical device, don't ask, to constantly mess with the rogue. The druid would take every opportunity to wild shape into a small critter good for scouting, and then place fake locks anywhere the rogue might conceivably try to use the search skill. The rogue's increasing paranoia whenever he found a lock, and his overblown promises of vengeance every time a random hole in a floorboard wasted a minute of his time and chimed at him, was a pretty good gag. It turned a little sour when the druid made an extra lock on an honest-to-goodness treasure chest. The rogue rolled a natural 20 to pick the first lock and got a chiming noise. Then he rolled a 3 and triggered an energy-draining trap that permanently lost him 5 HP. After that, the rogue stole every wand the druid had in the middle of the night and threw them all into a bottomless pit in the Underdark. I had a magical rod of rubber duck. Gave it to the party as a joke item because they kept asking for weird crap. Not one of them chose to identify it. It was an artifact-level rubber duck. Once it was part of your inventory, it would never leave it unless it wanted to. It had wisdom and intelligence of 28, sentience, and it could be attuned. It was actually a great old one that could grant anyone a wish spell with 100% accuracy at the cost of 2 of the caster's levels. Nobody learned that it was probably the most powerful item in the game. And what is the function of a rubber duck? In the first campaign I played, the party began their journey by finding an orc woman in a tavern whose baby was stolen, and what she found in its place was a knife with a weird symbol on the handle. She sent us with the knife in search of the baby. We spent hours and hours and session after session never using the knife in combat. We then found out that the knife would turn anyone it cut into a lizard. My character ate peanut butter off that knife more than once before finding this out. It may just be me, but that item sounds far from useless. Facing a beholder? Slice? Now you're a gecko. Unstoppable vampire lord? Nope, it's a chameleon now. There's a reason polymorph is a popular spell for getting rid of powerful enemies while you wipe up their minions. My party has been carrying around a wand of disguised self they found in a magic store bargain bin for over a year and haven't used it yet. Except that's not actually what it is, hence why it was in the bargain bin. It's actually a wand of this guy's elf, which once a day can summon an incorporeal elven servant to carry out a simple task for you. I was so happy with myself for coming up with that one, and so sad they never even tried to use it, so the pun goes unheard forever. My infamous Horn of Resounding Quacks was a hit, summoned any duck within a half-mile radius of the person using it. The party never went hungry after that. For clarification, it was indeed to call any and all ducks within the half-mile radius, but it wasn't a matter of instant teleportation. The ducks have to travel, but do so willingly, answering the call of the horn. Poor ducks. If you're an evil DM, you can get them used to it, so they never bring food anymore, and then they put them in a duckless place. Have fun starving, boys. Depends on how you read it. Summon as in any duck within a half-mile is summoned to you, there need to be ducks, or summon. Within a half-mile radius around you, a duck is randomly summoned. If there were no ducks before, there is one now. It might be out of your sight, quacking, or standing behind some rocks a quarter-mile away, but it's there nonetheless. Congratulations! The ethereal plane, the 7th layer of hell, and the deadly ruins of the great archwizard Asgordon are now infested with ducks, because your gosh damn bard kept blowing the horn every 3 seconds. I could see this. Some evil demigod lording over his demon minions, sneering as fire and smoke swirl around him, and then a duck appears on his lap. Then another on top of his throne. Suddenly, there's a dozen ducks all quacking about. Then hundreds. This is actually an incredibly powerful magic horn. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I gave my players an alchemy jug. They had it for most of the campaign, and mostly forgot about it apart from the odd joke, but when building to the end, they used it to torture my main villain. They'd captured him. To find out what it was and how to stop him, they used the jug to pour mayonnaise down his throat until he agreed to talk. That gave them advantage on the intimidation check they had to carry out, which they succeeded on. So mayonnaise is an instrument of torture. In my 3rd edition early days, my friend's older brother was DMing a game for my friends, my sister, and me. One of the items we got rolled on the random table was a gust of wind fan. It's exactly what it sounds like. Wave it, creates a powerful enough gust of wind to propel a boat and possibly rips itself to tatters. Threw it in the pack and forgot about it. A few sessions later, we're defending a town from waves of invaders. The final boss is a Cyclops or an Etin or something. Big bruiser, we see it approaching, with enough time to prepare for its arrival. My sister asks us to use all of our healing potions and then give her the glass vials, which we do. Then she turns to the DM and calmly explains how she takes the vials with her up a guard tower. She smashes and grinds them up, waits for an opportune time, then uses the fan to blow a gust of powdered glass particles into the Etin's eyes. The look on this man's face, a cross between, "Holy crap, that's awesome. I'm so happy a story like this is in my campaign world now," and "Frick, this boss was supposed to be difficult." In a game I'm currently in, our DM gave us a flask of endless water. It can produce water in a trickle, a flood, or a deluge that shoots 30 gallons of water in one turn. Our cleric has just fallen from a bridge over a chasm, and through clever bullcrapping, our sorcerer has managed to catch the falling cleric with a web spell. As we're all racking our brains to figure out a way to save them, our cleric pulls out the flask and uses the water cannon mode to propel herself back onto the bridge, using the web strands as a fulcrum. This sounds like what happens when you play D&D with engineers. I'm not sure me or any of my players would have ever thought about using it in that capacity. More water-based shenanigans follow. I had to literally ban the 3.5 spell Create Water because my entire party rolled classes that could learn it. The default is Cleric or Druid, but there's books that award it to Arcane casters as well, and solved everything with the stupid cantrip. It would blow your mind how many puzzles, traps, combat encounters, and social situations can be solved by liberal application of magic water. Someone refuses to talk, waterboard them. Pressure plates might be down this hallway, set them off from distance with a flood. There's a locked anything, break it by dropping water from a height. Ambushed, turn the road to mud and run away. Setting an ambush, turn the road to mud and wait. Starving, you can survive for 10 days on just water. Need to escape from a conversation, a pipe bursts, and the building floods. The list goes on. Turns out physicists and engineers can turn a cantrip into the power equivalent of a 9th level spell, given enough thought. I have an idea for my next character now. Your party and DM do have to be on board for this to work. We would literally spend half of a 6-hour session doing math and digging through the books in order to make this kind of thing happen. We found it fun. Most tables likely would not find it fun. We ended up with Excel sheets for things like newtons of force in terms of D, X, and air expenditure by race in terms of volume per hour, accounting for increased and decreased size categories. They did all of this to justify plans like shrinking themselves down, jumping in an extra-dimensional hole with fixed dimensions, and mailing themselves into a building. Yes, there was an easier way. No, it wasn't as much fun. The ban was fairly well agreed on eventually. The cantrip shenanigans were amusing for a few weeks, but they ultimately got tired of already having the solution to every encounter, and we agreed to limit its use out of combat, non-encounter scenarios. You want to create a slip and slide to navigate a wizard's tower? No. Once my party got a huge, beautiful magic sword which was improperly identified as a sword of ogre slaying. Instead, it was a cursed sword of ogre saying. Whoever wielded it would only be able to yell "Ogre!" at things. Several adventures later, they were attempting to catch a thief who was evading them. They came up with the brilliant idea of setting the sword as bait and just going about their business. Sure enough, sometime later they heard, "Ogre! Ogre! Ogre!" ring out through the town, and they caught him without consequence. Reminds me of the Ring of Hunan influence from volume 3 or 4 of the Encyclopedia Magica from 2nd edition AD&D.
Whenever attempted to be used, it caused a painful burning sensation in the user's mouth that could only be removed by consuming 1d4 plates of rice. The Ring of Hunan Influence. This jade ring is decorated with oriental characters including Fu Manchu and Charlie Chan. It affects all food eaten by the wearer. There is no noticeable change in taste, but one round after being eaten, the food begins to burn for 1d4 HP damage per round. Water only makes the burning worse. Plus 1 HP to the damage for one round. Only eating 1d6 plates of rice will ease the pain. However, no matter how much food is consumed, the wearer still feels hungry an hour later. For anyone who doesn't know, Hunan is a Chinese province known for their hot and spicy food, which I assume this is a reference to. Not while I was DMing, but my favorite useless magic items to this day are the Boots of Quickstep. Once per turn, you may click your heels as an action, to gain an action. It resulted in my character beginning each of his turn clicking his heels. It was marvelous. Once had my party find a magic spoon. It emitted a terrible aura of dark illusion magic, and merely holding it filled players with a sense of dread from its sheer chaotic energy. Its in-game abilities? It worked like a fork instead of a spoon. The arcane spork of +5 anxiety? Let it be known that the narrator is cackling maniacally and writing down magic item ideas while writing this script. A modified version of the 5e wind fan that only works once a day and immediately looks tattered after use, so you can never use it multiple times, but it only works once every 24 hours. Now, it sounds like a not bad magical item, but the only times it's ever been used is to show people what it does. So an NPC says, "Hey, what's this fan do?" The player grins, "I'll show you." Useless gust of wind noises. It happened 5 times and then it got sold off to the underground scrapper they were working for. Was playing a campaign on a tropical island type of place and an enemy knocked my weapon off a cliff, so I used a coconut as an improvised weapon, crit with that thing 4 times in a row, and decided to keep it for getting the final blow on people. Was a barbarian and the DM liked that the coconut was killing things so much he had me keep track of the kills, and eventually I had a 3+ coconut that on a crit would ricochet until it didn't kill something. So basically he gave me a coconut of great potential. A few odds and ends, a can of dehydrated water, just an empty can, a wand of kindling, just a stick to burn, a scroll of raise dead that makes a dead body float 6 inches off the ground, a ring of invisibility that turns only the ring invisible on use. One of my one-shot campaigns had all players at 8th level, so I wanted to give them magical items, but not anything too OP. So one of my monk players wanted a decanter of endless water, so I changed it to a homebrew version where it didn't do the stream, fountain or geyser things, but instead it would pour endless alcoholic beverages. He could make the decanter fill with mojitos, or margaritas, or a Heineken, whatever, but only to get drunk. I thought it was harmless and fine, until I realized he'd selected the Way of the Drunken Master and got drunk on command anywhere and everywhere. It was quite fun. I'm writing a new one-shot, and I might take some ideas from this post too. A DM once gave our party a mortar and pestle that let us grind out spices in fairly large quantities. We were supposed to use it as a hook to get involved with an army. It would have let the cooks keep the soldiers happy and put us in good graces of a local lord. Instead, we wound up completely abandoning that questline, setting up a spice shop and went into business. It was supposed to be a one-off adventure, but we had a great DM and it turned into the best long-term campaign I've ever played in. It had a court intrigue, assassination attempts, war, curses, everything you could want. It ended when we all went our separate ways at the end of high school, with one of the business partners, Human, dying of old age, another, Elvin, selling his shares of the business to the dead one's heirs to retire, and my gnome faking his own death and leaving town to avoid a jealous husband, literally riding off into the sunset on a flying merchant ship. Man, you know how much spices cost once upon a time? More than their weight in gold. Saffron is still worth more than its weight in gold now. A quill of penmanship and literacy allowed any creature to write their thoughts down in perfectly legible common. A rogue in the party was obsessed with capturing different creatures and monsters to learn their thoughts, only to find that most animals just wrote onomatopoeia versions of normal animal sounds, like roar or quack. The party was sick of it and in a later adventure agreed to trade off the quill to a half-orc bodyguard in exchange for information to ambush one of the campaign's villains. The half-orc would become a Thomas Paine-like thought leader, and his first 2 books were dedicated to the party. I got a corncob pipe that made bubbles. Seriously, that's just it. Just bubbles. They didn't put people to sleep, they didn't explode under flames, nothing. Maybe it would make someone's eyes burn if they rubbed it in.
We were assaulting a town and I was part of the crew taking the gatehouse. We barred the windows and doors and I put the pipe under the edge of the door and blew it like I was inflating my own life raft in the ocean. Soon, bubbles were pouring out at the seams and the guards inside were panicking hardcore. One of them tripped on something and hurt himself on his own weapon. Once we opened the door, they came stumbling out and we cut them down while they were disoriented and distracted. Shortly thereafter, I traded the stupid pipe for various types of arrows at a Fletcher. I had that damn pipe for a long time and only used it once. We were playing through a pre-made campaign. At one point, the players retrieved a magical artifact, which turned out to be an orb of controlled dragons. It does exactly what you'd expect. In theory, it could have been very useful, except no dragons were showing up in the campaign, so it was basically useless. It did, however, lead to a running gag where our most paranoid player kept attempting to control dragon random NPCs to see if they were secretly dragons in disguise. Belt of teleportation that only transported the belt and the pants of the wearer to an unoccupied location within 60 feet of the user. I put it in as a gag, but the players started using it to startle opponents by teleporting pants just above them. The shenanigans increased when they discovered the belt also teleported whatever was in the pants' pockets. My groups have a tradition of gifting players useless magic items with a birthday theme on their in-real-life birthday. Two of the favorites that I bestowed so far include a pair of boots that drop streamers everywhere he walked and a ring that turned the wearer's poop into chocolate cake, which could be eaten to regain 1 hit point. Why did you name this ring of healing poop cake? The Chocolate Fudge Maker. My DM gave my character a glove that when the word bravo is said, emits the sound of applause. My friend's character used it intentionally to blow our cover infiltrating an enemy stronghold because he wanted to fight something. Our GM gave us an item which was the head of an ancient goblin king. This severed head had the power to give good advice to us, but it was completely unrelated to the question. What should we do to kill the dragon? Remember to wash your hands after using the bathroom. How do parents of gold diggers feel about their kids' relationships? I'm an older brother. I finished school, got a job, got married, bought a house, and had kids. My parents are kind of average about me. They're proud of my family, but feel I didn't reach my earning potential. We got some inheritance from my grandmother, and I used it to modernize my house and buy a car. My sister finished school, got a job, started screwing her boss, moved into his house, got a promotion, splashed half of her inheritance on holidays and clothes, and the other half on a sports car, because she doesn't need a mortgage deposit now that she has a boyfriend with his own flat. My dad literally called me to tell me how proud he was of her buying a sports car all on her own. It would have been hilarious if it didn't highlight my parents' messed up values and complete blindness to their daughter's dependency on her butthole boss/boyfriend. I haven't seen the guy for a few years, but an old friend of mine started out as a gold digger with his girlfriend. He started dating her 4 years ago because he found out that she was rich. The dude came from a broken home with some really messed up parents. He also had ADHD as well as a couple of other learning disabilities. Quit high school in grade 11, but started dating her shortly before that. Her dad was filthy frickin' rich, as he had a lot to do with the mines in the area. A CEO in a huge mining town. He was seemingly mooching at first, didn't go to work, didn't do anything but drink and do substances with his girlfriend. More than once I heard that the father was going to kick him out, but was persuaded by his little girl not to. He eventually falls for the girl and not for the money and decides to take it upon himself to change. Out of nowhere, he says, "I want a job, I don't care what it is," to the girl's dad, and her dad puts him to work. Now, when I knew him, he was famous for his work ethic in intensive labor jobs. Dude was like the freaking Energizer Bunny. He worked his butt off, earned his promotions, and went back and finished high school, completed 2 trades, and the two of them bought a house together. To my knowledge, he rarely drinks and hasn't touched substances since he started working. I was pretty surprised because when I went to school with him, he caused nothing but trouble. Cousin is a gold digger. She was actually taught to be one by her mother, who married a very hardworking and self-made successful man but wasn't quite up to her own dreams. When my cousin was in college, she needed a new car, so she went to the dealership, flirted with the salesman, banged him for a week, and got a loaded new car at his own inside cost, then dumped him the next day. That was pretty par for the course. Car salesman to himself? Yep, still got it. And ladies and gentlemen, we're back on topics that make the narrator despair at the state of humanity. Don't be like this woman. Other way round for me, I'm a 21-year-old girl and my father is a gold digger. He's on his 3rd wife, who's a rich, former antiques dealer. They go on annual 6 to 10 month holidays in various continents, staying in 5-star hotels the whole time. They live in a penthouse overlooking Sydney Harbour, including the Harbour Bridge and Opera House. All of my brothers work constantly for everything they have. I'm a uni student who works 6 to 10 shifts a week at a pub, and I live in a semi with my mum, with a mortgage that's like twice as much as the bloody house is worth. Honestly though, I'm glad he found a rich wife. Means I won't have to take care of him when he's dying. My aunt and uncle were cash flow rich. Tons of cash, spent it all, no savings. So they looked really rich, but literally didn't have a penny. Their irresponsible behavior rubbed off on their 2 daughters. Got ridiculous degrees and then glamour jobs that didn't pay. Daddy wrote them a check every month to cover the difference. They dated male models who were as broke as they were. Then one day, Mummy and Daddy had to file for bankruptcy, and the daughters were informed they were being cut off. For good. No problemo. They bought tiny bikinis and met 2 lawyers the next day, and each one married the lawyer they met. One lawyer was bald, the other fat. From male models to that. How does Mum feel about the daughters? Brags about how successful their husbands are at every chance and how they're living this fabulous lifestyle. One lawyer was bald and the other fat, from male models to that. Did you just bust out a freestyle? One of my college friends was always open about wanting to find a rich guy to take care of her. She signed up for a dating site focused on wealthy older men looking for young attractive women. About a month after signing up, she met a guy through the site and went on a few dates. She was 21 and he was in his mid-40s. This would have been about February of that year. In March, he bought her a new Mercedes, and by the end of April had leased a brand new condo in Toronto for her, so she could be closer to him. She moved into the condo on the 1st of May. By November, she announced she was pregnant and they got married in the following spring, while my friend was 7 to 8 months pregnant. The kid is almost 2 now, and they legitimately seem like a happy married couple. She loves not having to work and spends as much time as she can at her parents' also fairly wealthy cottage. And her husband was on the website looking for a trophy wife to spend his money on, so there's an understanding between them. But from day one, she had the opinion of, I'm attractive and have a forward fashion sense, and this is what I want in life, which she found and fulfilled. She still keeps up her appearance as a stay-at-home wife, and they're always out at fancy dinners. I respect the crap out of both of them for knowing what they wanted and being mature about it. Sounds like a win-win for everybody in this case. I've definitely known guys who are pretty open about wanting a trophy wife. It is. There are so many relationships like this in Greenwich. It's like there was a freaking factory somewhere putting them together. It worked so well for them. Wife and husband don't love each other per se, but she's pretty and agrees to stay pretty, and he's rich and agrees to stay rich. Boom. Baby-making city. I'm not a gold digger, but my Chinese mother keeps telling me about the rich Asian girls who move to Cali and tries to get me to hook up with one. I don't see myself being happy with someone I have nothing in common with, though. Funny, my Taiwanese mother keeps telling me to watch out for the gold-digging mainlanders that just want a passport and half my assets. Good friends of mine, a bit older than me, a brother and sister. Sister is a gold digger for sure. She's on her 4th marriage to a millionaire. They came from humble beginnings. The dad owns his own business, but is very middle-of-the-road, middle class. The parents help the brother out a lot with money, and the sister constantly talks crap about him because of it, considers him a leech on their parents. Of course, the brother resents the sister for never having worked a day in her life, but vacations in Europe once a month. Thought I would answer because it's an interesting dynamic to have witnessed. People are very harsh in their judgment of who they consider gold diggers. It feels quite ridiculous sometimes to be the older sister-in-law to a gold digger. I'm older than her by 10 years, yet she gives me life lessons on a regular basis. For example, when she feels like she hasn't had a good day, she calls and says, money doesn't buy happiness. Tease me the frick off, because she has no idea what it's like to have real problems, like getting ready to lose your home or worrying that you're going to have to feed your kids that day. She married a guy 15 years older so that she could sit on her butt and shop. She has a huge house and no responsibilities. I'm not a jealous person. I'm happy for her if she'd just stop talking bullcrap about how hard she has it when she knows very well that her brother and I aren't doing well financially. She's also a bragger, constantly throwing it in my face like, come and see my new car, isn't it awesome? We're going away for the weekend, too. Can you babysit? Look at the pictures of this exotic place we're going. I can't wait. And I'm sitting there like I haven't taken vacation since my honeymoon. She knows this. I don't really blame her though. She's completely unaware of anyone else other than herself. Really. She doesn't do it for meanness, she's just dense. Yeah, marrying someone for their wealth and ease of life might be okay if both sides are aware of it. But then choosing to whine about your rich person problems and giving life lessons to your less well-off friend is a real crapbag move. Don't forget your roots, people. It's a job that takes time to perfect. It's not like the old days when you just keep shoveling pay dirt into the trommel until you find a nice streak. Sadly, the bygone days of hitting glory hole after glory hole just don't happen anymore. Most companies go bankrupt the very first year, and if you don't adhere to the strict environmental regulations, you could be kicked off a site at a moment's notice. Honestly, I'd rather have my daughter just find a nice rich doctor and become a housewife, but that's not her style. She always played with her brother's Tonka trucks. The Yukon is in her blood. Her grandfather was a gold digger too. If you marry for the money, you're going to earn every penny. Not sure where I heard that saying, but I think it's great. My ex was a gold digger. He couldn't handle that I'm happy not being filthy rich. I'm comfortable, that's enough. He left for a rich girl and then left her for a richer girl and married her. He's already cheated. I dodged a bullet. Isn't it more like the bullet took a turn? I think it's at least somewhat likely that most parents of gold diggers never thought that much about their children's lives, ever. This makes sense. An ex of mine used to complain about her dad, a doctor who never had time for her. When I was dating her, I found out that her ex was 25 years older than us and had founded and sold a company for tens of millions of dollars. She currently is not working and lives at her family's beach house. This will probably get buried, but I'll post it anyway. I'm not the parent, but the child of a gold digger. My dad was educated exclusively at private schools and elite Ivy League education. He got his master's in finance by age 24. He's from a politically connected family and could be making millions on Wall Street. Instead, he took much lower-paying jobs in order to help raise me and my brother. My mum has her degree in art history. She dumped her previous fiancé and met my dad while celebrating that she'd dumped her old flame. They got married, and within 9 years they were divorced. I constantly heard them fight about how my father wouldn't give her some spending money. He repeatedly told her that if she'd like to spend money, that she had a degree that she could earn her own with. This was not acceptable to her, so they got divorced. Within 2 years, my mum was remarried to a doctor and quit the job she had since doctors' wives don't work. Within 3 months, the marriage fell apart. Throughout my upbringing, my mother constantly beat it into me and my brother's skull that you should always have the finest things, never settle. She would always make comments in private about how people didn't always look their finest. This was in spite of the fact that she refused to work a job that was beneath her. To my mum, how something makes her look is infinitely more important than anything else. Her new fiancé is awesome and he's the VP of a branch of banks. She spins this as, he's the VP of a bank. She would always brag about where her husbands, at the time, were educated. My brother works in business and she spins this as, he's a consultant who has clients in Manhattan, Toronto, etc. I work at a bakery doing hourly level tasks. She tells her friends, my youngest works as a baker making organic high-end bagels. Despite earning into the six figures, she somehow never has money, yet just bought a new BMW. My mum is both a gold digger and a fricking snob. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have a brother who tried to be a gold digger. He met a girl in the then AOL chat rooms. She lived in the next county. They got friendly and started to meet together on a friendly face-to-face basis. At one point, she invited him to her home where she lived with her parents. This is when my brother discovers the girl's family is rich. They lived in a giant mansion, lots of acreage, servants, and had a huge game room, complete with pinball machines, video game machines, a jukebox, etc. The girl's father, as it turned out, once owned a company that distributed classic TV shows for syndicated reruns on TV stations all across the country. I say once owned because he had it sold for the sum of $200 million back then, and the girl was an only child. Hence, she stood to inherit everything of her father's someday. My brother was excited. Even knowing her only a few weeks, in spite of not being in love with this girl, behind her back he was talking marriage and living in the lap of luxury for the rest of his life. How he had made it if he played his cards right. Unfortunately for my brother, the girl was of a very liberal persuasion. She had no respect for herself, cheating on one boyfriend with another and another. Even more unfortunate for my brother, he wasn't able to get in on any of that action with the girl. She was sleeping with every other boy except for my brother. He couldn't get himself out of the friend zone. He was the only one who couldn't get himself out of the friend zone. On one occasion, one of the girl's boyfriends made an unannounced visit to this girl at her home. Her family naively and innocently cheerfully directed him upstairs where the girl was. He went upstairs to the girl's bedroom and walked in on her going down on some other guy. The both of them completely in the naughty. The boyfriend, in a rage, grabbed the stalker's guy, grabbed him out of the room, and tossed him down the stairs. The family was shocked to see this unclothed guy come tumbling down the stairs into the room with them. Anyway, over a few months' time, my brother and this girl drifted apart to the point where they never saw each other or conversed online again. He watched his dream of being rich fade into the sunset. I don't know where that girl is today or what happened to her. How is he her boyfriend, but was still in the friend zone? I'm quite amazed you've made that douche nozzle sound like the victim. Good job, that's a skill. Yeah, I don't get it. It sounded like he wasn't even dating her. He met her at a beauty salon and was interested in her type of purse. That should say something. He's happy that she has an ample backside and knows that she's dated others that are well known. I'm worried that she is spending his money on cosmetic surgery when she should be buying toys for their kids. I want them to get a prenup. It's something that he needs to have. He started out as a dishwasher, got promoted to janitorial, and then to fry cook. He worked his way to a Mercedes, but I'm afraid that he would just have traded her up for some other girl anyway. Yep, that seems like an arrangement that could very well end in tears for one or the other person sooner or later, but adding kids to the mix makes it a little sadder. There's an entire town called Wellesley, Massachusetts, and its neighbor, Western Massachusetts, where all couples are made of rich guys who marry gold diggers/trophy wives. If you have a chance to be there, it's hysterical to watch. So self-absorbed and so self-centered. I'm sure there are other places like that in the US, but that's the one I know. I have a family who lived there, and it's so true. My aunt, a doctor, married another doctor. She's the absolute minority there, and people simply cannot understand why she'd choose to have a career when she could just benefit from her husband's without doing any work. Mind-blowing. You know, I'd rather they leached off someone rich than me. The talentless bums. My boss is extremely wealthy and is constantly dating young girls who are obviously gold diggers. Not very attractive guy pushing 60 who refuses to date anyone over 35. We all at the office recognize it and think, to ourselves of course, that it's sad and borderline pathetic. However, he's happy with what he does and loves the attention, so we all just go with the flow. I think it's obnoxious and think very little of his girlfriends, but whatever, it's his life and his money, and if that's how he wants to spend it, he can be my guest. I'm sure I can comment on behalf of my mother. The one time I dated someone with a good job, $100K a year, she was thrilled I'd found the kind of person she had prayed and hoped for. Someone who could take care of me. She has the opinion that I'm a little too lofty and in over my head for the real world, despite having always had a practical plan for myself, studying hard to graduate high school early, putting myself through college, always working a full-time job, if not two, to keep myself funded. Only once has she helped me financially. $600 I never even asked for. But this guy must be 100% a good catch, cause he bought her a new toaster when hers broke, and an expensive radio she wanted for Christmas, i.e. the trickle-down economy. What takes care of me will benefit her. Mutual friend to both parties. I went to high school with a boyfriend and know the girlfriend from a mutual friend. They start dating because she was a rebound for him, and he was willing to take her crap. Guy proposes last year and she denies him because she thinks she can do better. I know her sister and that's what she told me. Fast forward a year when he got another job and is in the middle of buying his first house and is doing better, she all of a sudden wants a ring and her name on the mortgage. All our mutual friends think she's pulling a scumbag move because she definitely wasn't going to stay with him before. Apparently the mum is putting her up to this, and the boyfriend is not enjoying buying his first house because he realizes now what a succubus he's dating. My ex is, or was, a gold digger. When her mum told me that she didn't think I could afford her daughter, it teed me off, but then I realized what the mum was really trying to tell me. Rich guys who are smart keep a low profile and never reveal their money until they're sure that the woman is sincere and not gold digging. There was a reality show about princes from foreign countries who came to America looking for a wife. They pretended to be regular schmoes until the right girl came along. One guy from India lived in a palace, and I mean with a capital P. He had over 100 servants just to maintain the place. I didn't see the end of the show, but I understand the sentiment. With the way divorce courts in America work, a stupid rich guy who isn't careful is going to be writing a check with a lot of zeros in it. Brother of a guy who married a gold digger. I pretty much know what mum thinks about the mess, though. My brother is an MD, very highly regarded, extremely highly paid. He did the classic marry a nurse thing. She barely put up with our mother and I, his only family, while dating. Once married, she turned into a psycho B-word from hell towards us. She's made his life miserable, but they have kids together, so he stays with her. He's put her through a couple more degrees because she didn't want to do nursing anymore, but wanted to do something else. Of course, she doesn't actually bother to use the degrees for anything, so it's a total waste of money. She does nothing but sit around the house all day, doesn't take care of it, but they have a maid so the house isn't a wreck. My mother and I both feel really sad for him. We're hoping that once the kids get old enough, he'll dump her sorry butt. Also hoping the kids don't turn out to be train wrecks. The older one has some serious anxiety problems, probably from her mum being a constant screaming B-word, but at least she can get free psych meds, so she's got that going for her. Mum has set up trusts for the kids and put in clauses preventing the psycho B-word from ever having any form of control over them or benefiting from them. So the kids will also be able to pay for their psychiatric care when they're out on their own, even if everything else goes to heck. Not a gold digger, but my mum is. To give you an idea, my biological dad was a World War II vet, loaded out the wazoo, boats, houses, businesses, everything, who was married to another woman when I was conceived. I'm 27, and she's on her third husband right now. A sweet 92-year-old man who bought her 2 cars, a house that was $250,000, and pays her bills so she doesn't work. This includes the $800 a week treatments for her dog. My sister sugared for a while, which I suppose is a form of gold digging. Everyone found it gross, including me. Now that I finally understand no matter how hard I work, I'll never not be poor, I'm considering it myself. I don't have the stomach for it. It's not the screwing the old guys part. I actually don't have much reaction to that at all. It's that there's a whole lot about it basically play acting as what every horrible man on earth expects a woman to be, and I just can't fake that. It's gross for one thing, obviously, but it's actually a lot of work being that kind of woman when it doesn't come naturally to you. Sugar babies earn every penny of that money tolerating these stupid, annoying old men. I suspect I went to school with many gold diggers. I went to an expensive private high school, so I suspect my former classmates are used to a certain lifestyle. I have them on Facebook, and I've seen 5 of those girls marry much older gentlemen. I want to believe there's more to the relationship, but they're fairly attractive, and their husbands are much, much older. Their wedding pictures, however, are quite pretty. I used to be friends with this girl. She kind of had ugly duckling syndrome. She was cool to be friends with, but she just wasn't someone you'd want to date. She was really into sports and kind of one of the guys. About 6 months after high school, she turned 18. Then she had this great boyfriend. All of the girls talked about how awesome he was and how he had a pool at his house, had a couple of nice cars, etc. We all go to this party at this guy's house, and we're hanging out around the pool, and this guy in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, comes out and starts talking to us. I thought it was her dad or something. She walks up to him and sticks his hand in the back of her bikini bottoms, and she playfully tries to pull away, but they make out. Pretty mind-blowing. Turns out this guy just retired from the Marines and was her dad's commanding officer. Next, all of her friends are hooking up with military retirees. I think him and her got married a couple of years later. My boyfriend's sister is 100% a gold digger and daddy's little girl. She married into a wealthy family at 25, divorced him, ka-ching, then married his best friend who was independently, and much more, wealthy. I guess she had to change her plans after her lucrative philosophy degree didn't work out. My niece married a guy she met at high school because his family was loaded. His dad died not too long ago and they inherited $272 million. I can't say I'm pro-gold digging, but damn. Who is that guy or girl that you work with? In my office, it's the "I took the liberty" guy. You come back from lunch and your desk is cleared of the project you had been working on. You run to the bathroom and find your freshly poured coffee replaced with your washed, empty mug. As you dare to say, "What the hell?" he comes around the corner of your cube. "I took the liberty of straightening up your work area," and gleefully moves on to ruin someone else's afternoon. This can also be called the Helperton. That's when you go into his office and take the liberty of turning every single thing upside down. Work with a woman who repeats, "Having fun yet?" almost every hour of the shift. Does she also say, "Another day in paradise," and TGIF, hump day? There is this one man in the office, I'll call him Tim. Tim is a very elderly and angry man, known for this woman's cardigan he wears every day, as well as his many heated conversations, of which the snippets are pure gold. Last week, out of the blue, he proclaims he was up to his knees in blood while on a phone call. Yesterday, he said he would rather be doing blow down the streets of New York. One of my favorites included, "Sometimes in life you're the chip, sometimes you're the dip. I love and fear Tim." Detox caseworker here. I work with that girl who talks about her failing marriage, how much she hates her kids, and how much she hates working where she works. She's a very odd person. One day she loves her husband and talks about how much of a god he is, yet she hates her marriage. She talks about what little SOBs her kids are, yet she wants another one, making it 6 children. Lazy as frick, and she's that girl at the yearly Christmas party where she's the only one that goes over her limit and starts spilling secrets people have told her. Not to anyone's surprise, she's gotten many of her coworkers to hate her guts upon walking in the door.
Why do social services workplaces always hire the crazies? Does someone in HR say, "Oh yeah, you came to the interview with mismatched shoes and a transformer in your hair, you're caseworker material"? Trust me, I'm a caseworker, no one wants this job. It's hard as frick and emotionally taxing. We have insane turnover, leading to some questionable hires. For some reason, social workers are enshrined in my mind as being very level-headed, if bureaucratic and dull people. Maybe that's Hollywood influencing me. So there are nutters among them, I guess, judging by those last posts. My boss asked me what my Christmas plans were. I told him I'm Jewish. He, in all seriousness, asked me if I would be more comfortable in accounting. Do you work for Michael Scott? Is he Jewish? That sounds like something any number of funny Jewish guys I know would kill to deadpan.
A salesman who occasionally comes through and hassles us. The first time he asked what I was working on, I didn't realize what he was up to. I thought he needed help with something, and of course, I'm glad to help. He keeps asking things like, "You're not busy. You don't have anything going on?" It seemed odd how many times he asked, but still, I'm thinking he wants help, is trying to be polite, and is worried he's interrupting me. I get started on what he asks, and he leaves. Next thing I know, my boss arrives asking why I have nothing to do. Thankfully, my boss is pretty cool, so nothing bad happened. The salesman is not our boss or even in our department, yet he occasionally comes through checking on us and asking things like, "Why does that job take 2 people?" He's such a prick.
If he was doing his job, he shouldn't have time to nitpick. He's trying to make himself look good by making everyone else look bad. Unfortunately, he will probably end up being middle management. Most bosses love suck-up snitches and don't realize the rat doesn't do their own job efficiently.
There's a dude that watches videos of God knows what and screams along to them. I think he's watching wrestling or maybe boxing or something, because every now and again he'll just shout, "Oh, put him on a body bag!" Or, "Oh, Queen, B!" and start dusting off his hands loudly and laughing. It's fricking bizarre. The guy that I work with has only one eye and can drive a forklift better than I ever could with 2. Great guy, too.
But how does he wink at cute girls while he's forklifting?
Every single day, he comes in and spews some bullcrap. He's just invested another $175K in some property. He just had a genius moment on the way into work and will now be able to solve the energy crisis. He's just met some famous smart person, like Elon Musk, who said he was the smartest person they'd ever met. This isn't occasionally, this is all the time. Literally every single day. You can't even talk with this guy. It's so irritating. He follows me everywhere, and you try to have some normal conversation, and he just spews more bullcrap. I tried talking with him once and said, "Well, my car has this thing going on with it. I may need to take it to the shop." And he replies with, "Oh, that reminds me. My boyfriend is having the Lamborghini dealer come over tonight. He's having a midlife crisis, but work just gave him another $2 million bonus because he's such an amazing architect." Frick this guy.
Start actively perusing these conversations. Ask for him to expand on the details of the story to see how ridiculous they get. For instance, you could have asked him, "Oh, your boyfriend's an architect. Has he worked on anything I'd recognize?" To which you would likely get an outlandish answer, which you could make the person expand upon again. It's like a game.
Oh, he always comes up short when we ask for proof. He kept going on once about his lake house at Lake Tawakoni, which he put up on an Airbnb. One of the other guys I worked with started bugging him for the link to look it up. He wanted a place to go to, with his wife on a weekend getaway. Crazy coworker comes back and says, "Oh, you couldn't afford it," and says the insurance on the boat rental alone is $3,500 a day. Still never came back with an address. We kept pushing him on it. "Oh, it's booked until October." This was back in the spring. We still haven't gotten an address on that house. One of the guests on Airbnb rented the house and a huge party with 100 plus people, and they broke sinks off the walls and burned the couch on the front lawn. His maid, who he hired to look over the place, called and told him about all the damages. She sent him photos, but when we asked to see them, "Oh, I don't have them on me." Really? Did she send them via UPS? How do you not have photos on you in this day and age? Anyway, we asked about them the next day. Oh, Kevin, his boyfriend, wouldn't let me show them to anyone, and miraculously insurance sent them $45,000 within 2 days for all the damage. Never seen insurance work that fast before. Someone found his boyfriend's resume online, but he's not an architect. Something similar to interior design, I forget the title, and he had done stuff like he designed the layout of some gas stations. You're going about it wrong. You don't want proof of the story, you want the most outlandish, impossible story you can pull from the guy. This guy gets it. I had a coworker snowboard down a mountain in front of an avalanche after he was launched from a helicopter. That's what I get for trying the bunny slope. Frick you, CB. I put my boogers on the adjustment levers of your chair and then frick up your settings when you're in the bathroom. I'm a waiter, and one of my coworkers is an Italian old man that's so close to retirement that he doesn't care anymore. He pretends to pee into wine buckets by turning his back to the customers and emptying a water bottle into them. He prank calls the restaurant by calling and going, "Go freak yourself," before hanging up. Smokes constantly and is never on time. I love the too close to retirement to care guy. I used to work with one who would answer the phone with, "Hey, what are you up to besides being ugly?" Everyone knew his sense of humor though, and he was much beloved. I work in an office. I have an older lady, 45 to 50, next to me who says, "Awesome sauce," at least 5 times a day. I'm thinking about quitting because of her. Bring a liquor flask to work. Every time she says, "Awesome sauce," yell out, "Woo! There it is!" and take a swig. Pretend like it's normal and never explain why. She'll either stop saying it or you'll get so drunk you stop caring. Either way, mission success. I feel like there's some differing opinion on what constitutes that guy or girl. I honestly just thought it was some kind of weird pervert who constantly turned everything towards their nice interest. Turns out it might just be any sort of weirdo. My old coworker. I couldn't tell if he was a mad genius or a man-child. I have not and will not meet anyone else in my life who is anything like this guy. He, 1, was so American that he told me he would show up to my birthday party in a Stars and Stripes banana hammock cawing like an eagle. He moved before my birthday, or I think he actually would have. 2, took the fan and some wires out of a recycled PC. He somehow found a D battery somewhere and hooked it up to the wires so the fan would run. He would lightly fan people as they worked, sometimes right in front of our customers. You nice and cool yet? 3, drafted and made a falcon talon on the end of a magnetic tentacle. The talon is a phone holder. He has a patent and is marketing it soon. There's also a version with a monkey tail on the end of a raptor jaw. 4, he put a rubber band ball on a paperclip, then impaled it to the ceiling of the break room. Turned on the strobe function on his phone's flashlight and opened a Pandora Club playlist. Told everyone they deserved a disco party and would shriek when someone started to take it down. 5, hugged an old man who went off on another coworker because he just needs a friend. 6, strategically planned out how to travel from the front of the store to the back using only the rafters. A section of it he needed to turn into a liquid. He drew a diagram. 7, printed a bunch of rebel flags on the store printer and gave them to our black supervisor, saying she needed to hand them out to preserve his heritage. He was Southern and completely sarcastic. 8, printed a banner-sized check made out to him for millions of dollars. Subject was, "Winner for the biggest poop." Plenty more too, I just can't keep them all straight. I miss that guy. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I don't work there anymore, but when I was a delivery driver for a pizza company, there was a guy who just didn't give a frick. The boss had the hots for him, so he got away with so much crap. Never arrived when he was supposed to, always got to go home on time, or early if he wanted, even if we were completely backed up. Whenever he closed, he never cleaned in the back kitchen, so instead of firing him, his shifts got changed to opens. He would take random breaks and play guitar and sing loudly about getting wasted and smoking green herb in the storeroom, loud enough for the customers to hear. At one stage, he even peed on the floor in the room where we made the dough. After a few months, he went on holiday. He never came back, but his name was always on the roster. The stories I have about that place are amazing. I'm thankful I don't work there anymore, but also glad that I did. Worked or trained with a lady once who said bonus in place of any kind of hooray type statement. I just found $1 on the ground. Bonus! I'm taking my girlfriend out on a date tonight. Bonus! I just purchased a delicious beverage from the vending machine. Bonus! I didn't get hurt doing this mildly unsafe task. Bonus! It was getting to be a little much, but she quit very shortly after being hired. I was so thankful.
She quits. Bonus.
I have an older lady of the same age range as well who says, "Oh, Milanta," all the time. All the time. Thankfully, I don't see her too often since we work in different departments. When I do see her, this inevitably is something she says. I don't get it. How does that phrase become such a crucial part of someone's vocabulary? Oh man, we have the over-opinionated oversharer. We stopped using her real name and now just refer to her as TMI. Hey, did you send that document over yet?
Well, I would have if it weren't for the fact that this guy I've been seeing for the past 3 days has this brother who's a total D-bag. Wasn't even considerate of my gluten allergy over the weekend, which really sparked my ADHD, so I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes on Saturday, even though the liberals keep raising the taxes on them, which actually worked out because I lost 3 pounds from not having an appetite.
Okay, can you just send it over? This is every conversation. She sounds like she has the most confusing political views ever.
Sounds like my coworker. We'll call her Carla. We had a girl transfer to our office last week, and Carla had already told her about the UTI she had, like 4 months ago. I've personally heard or overheard the story about her food poisoning incident at least a dozen times. I don't think anyone needs to hear it was coming out of both ends. Ever? Carla was out sick yesterday after having an allergic reaction to something, so heaven help us today if she returns. See also that time she tried to get something off the top shelf and fell and hit her elbow. The 3 times she's had kidney stones, her 2 UTI infections, food poisoning, the 24 mosquito bites she got on vacation, and a partridge in a pear tree. The guy who eats several hard-boiled eggs every morning for breakfast in an open cubicle environment. The smell is somehow worse on Monday mornings. I used to work with a guy who would only eat 4 hard-boiled eggs for lunch each day. But he'd only ever get through 3 of them and he'd walk around the office trying to hand people his extra egg. That was the most normal part about the guy, I'm afraid. Can I offer you a nice egg in this trying time?
Is he perhaps eating 4 dozen eggs? If so, he might just be trying to get large. But beware, once he's grown, that number will jump to 5 dozen eggs. Naturally, he'll become approximately the size of a flat-bottomed river vessel. Whenever he wants to say something, he pauses in the middle of the sentence like he's waiting for you to react to every bit of information.
So, my son was watching Netflix,
Pauses for 4 seconds, eye contact all the time,
and he told me to join him.
Pauses again,
to start watching Jessica Jones.
He usually does it with a glass of water and takes a sip during the pauses. I used to work with a guy who would eat those Vienna sausages out of the little can, then slurp the juice in the bottom. No. I cringed so hard at that I think I pulled a muscle in my jaw. There is a special place in hell for people who eat loudly in a busy workplace. I think honestly even hearing the word slurp makes me shudder and gag slightly. But that might just be me being a type A weirdo. I like all of my coworkers. The woman I couldn't stand was HR from corporate. She was here for a week and I could not wait for her to leave. She made sure that we knew she didn't care about me and the other lady, both temporary employees, even though we're likely to be hired. She would not stop talking about how she's single and men were hitting on her in all the countries she had visited on her vacation. She constantly talked about how she's trying to lose weight, but kept eating the fattiest crap I've seen, all while complaining about America's eating habits. She took over our marketing manager's office for the week because she was too lonely in the back area. Sorry, the graphic designer and I are busy working. She would not shut the frick up about shopping. She didn't understand that I don't have extra money to spend. She cooked horrible-smelling fish in the microwave, then proceeded to burn some popcorn later. She kept stealing all of my soft Kleenexes I bought from home. She cancelled our work Halloween party. Good lord, she was unpleasant. Apparently, I live in a TV show and no one told me. When I was in the Air Force, there were plenty of these types of people, but there was one legend who'll outlive them all. Let's call him Vic. Vic was in his late 30s maybe, balding, overweight, annoying, and generally the worst NCO the US Air Force ever saw. Here's a list of his accomplishments. Vic routinely practiced terrible weapon discipline. He would constantly have his weapon pointed at you. He couldn't even clear his weapon to enter the chow hall. A Marine had to do it for him. I had never been so embarrassed to be an airman in all my service. Vic somehow came back to the site with junk every single day. We have no idea where he found it or what half of it was. He once brought back a gigantic Donkey Kong-looking hammer, no explanation for its intended use. Another time, he came back with a belt of ammunition that he'd found on the road. Yeah, sure, you know, it's a war zone. People get blown up every day by improvised explosives on the side of the road. Just go pick up something like that. Vic would argue with you about where your hometown is located geographically. Vic was responsible on more than one occasion for complete mission failure. The specifics I can't quite divulge, but rest assured he was brilliantly stupid. Vic could barely speak or write English. He was born in Florida. His ancestors came to this country a couple of hundred years ago. Vic dropped a T-wall, gigantic concrete wall, on a tent with a front loader. Almost killed someone. Vic wore my uniform top back to his barracks, but then later denied the whole thing. Vic was fired from his position twice on 2 separate deployments. Saw him a year later, he had been promoted. This lady at my office has freakishly good hearing and preemptively does weird helpful things for people. Like yesterday, an intern asked one of our agents for the agent's code. Her office is at the other end of the suite, but somehow she heard, wrote down each agent and their code on a post-it, and brought it to the intern's desk. If she overhears someone speaking with service ops about a specific form, she'll quietly email them a copy. Little things like that. People think it's super creepy. I only know this because it's me and I just overheard my coworkers talking about how weird I am. Oh. Maybe you should stop for a week and see what happens. Maybe they'll miss it or you can be lazier. Don't stop doing what you're doing. Just pipe up and say, "Oh, I have that info for you right here." People will appreciate you without the creep factor ever being added in. My boss leaves notes at my desk for me every so often ranging from "you look good today" to "I fricking hate you." My personal favorite, he once wrote "love you" on a sheet on my desk, then went to my coworker's cube next to mine and I could hear him writing something. When he left, the coworker and I both asked, "What did he write on your desk?" and showed each other simultaneously. His said, "You, not so much." Oh man, let me tell you about Hugo. Where to begin? It's holiday party time, and the ice is all frozen into one big chunk. Not to worry though, Hugo is on it. Here's a big rusty hammer borrowed from one of the foresters. Don't worry about using a dirty hammer to break up something you're about to put in your drink. A little iron oxide in your soda is good for the constitution. Am I right? What's that you say? A cake for someone's retirement? How nice! Hugo will cut himself a nice big slice, then lick the frosting off the knife before putting it back in the cake. Yes, we all saw you do that, and yes, we're going to wash the knife. Heck yes, another holiday party. What is this item on the buffet? Will Hugo like it? Guess he had better stick his fork in there to grab a piece to try while standing in line. Oh no, Hugo has a cold. Better go gurgle some water in the kitchen sink, then spit it back out. Oops, he forgot to take a sponge everyone uses to clean their dishes out of the sink first. Oh well, better just leave it in there. It's all dirty now. Bonus time, I also work with Jacob. One day, a mutual coworker left a salad out on her desk because she had an errand to run during lunch. When she came back, half of the salad was gone. What's this? A note from Jacob? Apparently, the salad looked too good, and he couldn't help himself. Schlepp brings in 2 bags every day filled with his crap, like a bagman. Notebooks, clothes, food, toys, junk. He leaves little bits of paper around, upon which little pieces of his mind spill out, like the third chair from the window. What the frick does that even mean? He writes Doctor Who fanfiction, and we got to read some once. Not good. Smiles and mumbles and never looks anyone in the eye. I think he's gonna kill us someday. Guy openly declared he took the job because he expected it to be nothing but ugly, fat women. He obviously meant it because he couldn't work with any of the more attractive women in the office. Constantly told one that she was too pretty to be smart, and then would switch it up by telling her how stupid she was. Constantly scoffed at anyone who offered him help, and never hesitated to mention that he had a master's degree. Told me, "Don't frickin' argue with me," around coworkers when I corrected him. He was wrong. Had a loud booming voice in an office where voices carry, and would stand in your office saying the most inappropriate things like, "I like to bang pregnant girls because they can't get pregnant." Came in one day after being at an adult club all night and walking to work after his car broke down with a sunburn on one half of his body. He didn't hesitate to tell everyone exactly what had happened. A girl was stretching and had her arms extended out, and he, likely purposefully, walked crotch first right into her hand and proclaimed loudly, "Stop touching my Johnson!" Had some neurological issue which caused him to shake a bit, not Parkinson's, pretty regularly, and would compound that by downing no less than 5 cups of coffee before 10 a.m. until he was a total mess. Updated service tickets with very helpful and professional comments like, "Dropped in your queue like it's hot," and "Solved this problem like a boss." When he was finally confronted about the list of transgressions, he confided, "I'm surprised it took them so long to talk to me about it." When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.